We researched the most popular IELTS tips so you don't have to. I also have 2 students here and they're going to talk through each tip and show you how it helped them move from a band 7 to a band 9 and also show you some of the tips that actually lower your score. So let's start with the first part of the video, IELTS listening. So tip number 1 is one of the main reasons why band 9 students get a band 9 in speaking, but a much lower score in reading or listening. How is that even possible? And it's all to do with spelling. So if you spell a word incorrectly, it doesn't matter if it is the correct answer, just one letter out, it is wrong. Have a look at this photo. Every day in Vietnam, I would go to the local Starbucks and they would think that I was their Lord and Savior when really I was just Chris. All right. I'm not Christ. I'm just Chris. All right. So it can make a difference. So we're going to teach you the same technique that we taught these 2 students. And this is going to massively improve your spelling. So if you are working on your listening, you were probably working on your writing at the same time. So I want you to follow this system. Number 1, open up a document and turn spell check off. Don't have spell check, especially autocorrect. Don't have it on. We want to be able to see your spelling mistakes in a minute. Step 2, write one of your practice essays. You're going to be practicing essays anyway. Write the whole practice essay. Once you get to the end, turn spell check on and it will reveal all of your spelling mistakes. Step number 3, get a new notebook. This is now your spelling mistake notebook. Go through your essay, write down all of your spelling mistakes as they are spelled incorrectly in one column, and in the next column you're going to write it spelled correctly. Once you do that for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, depending on how much practice you're doing for writing, you will start to notice patterns. You'll start to notice problem words or the type of words that you have an issue with. And then you will be able to easily spot those and spot, oh, I might spell this incorrectly, and then spell it correctly on test day. The next tip is about paper-based versus computer-based. Some students prefer paper, some students prefer the computer. Luckily, both students have done both. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons of each, and then you can decide which one is right for you. So Priyanka, you've done both. Which one did you prefer, paper or computer?
Definitely computer. I have a hard time multitasking, and I felt like when I did the paper-based test, I was distracted because I had to write down the option and have to listen at the same time. But with the computer-based test, I could just click. As soon as I heard what I wanted to hear, I would just click and it made it simpler, less distraction.
Which one did you prefer?
I prefer the computer test because I feel like it comes more natural to me to be listening and answering at the same time instead of looking at the book and then listening and then reading and then looking for the answers. I think that's a lot more distracting and it's overwhelming at the same time and it wastes a lot of time from me.
When I did the test, so I've done the listening test, I've done the paper-based test and the computer-based test, I get distracted easily. And the good thing about the computer-based test is you get headphones mostly all the time. Paper-based, sometimes it's headphones, sometimes it's just a recording on speakers. But I find with speakers, there was people coughing, the audio wasn't that good, the sound in the room wasn't that good. Whereas with the headphones, you could just totally focus and lock in. Like, I'm not going to lose marks because of my English ability, but I will lose marks because I'm just distracted and I start thinking about something else. So not really related to English skills or listening, but again, anything that can help you. And I think the computer-based test does help a lot of people who, like me, get distracted easily. So if you get distracted easily, you don't like multitasking, and you prefer to look at a screen than a page, I would recommend computer-based. It is not automatically going to massively boost your score, but it will reduce stress, reduce distractions, and help you get the best possible score for you. But it's not a magic trick that's going to boost your score by 2 or 3 bands or anything like that.
But if you do have to do a paper test, I would highly recommend using a pencil, because if you make a mistake, you can just erase it. If it's with a pen or anything else, you can't cut it out. So
absolutely agree. It sounds like a silly question, should I use a pen or a pencil? What has that got to do with your English level or your listening skills? But just tactically, if you make a mistake with a pen, students get very flustered and they're like, oh, it's so messy and I don't know how to correct it. Or with a pencil, you can just easily correct it and put in the correct answer and move on. Remember, during the listening test, the recording will just keep going. So if you've made a mistake and you're worrying about like, how am I going to correct this in pen, you might lose your place and then the whole thing is messed up. So it's not just listening skills, not just English skills. You have to be tactical as well. Another very common question we get is all about tip number 4, which is, can I write all in capital letters? A lot of students email us and ask, should I just use all capital letters or some capitals and the rest normal letters? Like, which one? So before you started working with us, what were your thoughts about this question? Because I know you had this problem before.
I did actually. I didn't know the answer to the question, and I was struggling at that time, and I was so confused if I should use capital letters or small letters, and I wasn't focused on the test instead.
So again, this is one of those things that's not really anything to do with listening skills or English skills, but it's about focus on how many things your brain is thinking about on test day. Remember, during the listening test, you only get to hear it once and it just keeps going. So it's as much a focus test as a listening test. And anything that can improve your focus is going to be good. One of the things that we can do to improve people's focus, we'll talk about more later on in the video, but it's just reducing the number of things you're thinking about. So like you, if you're going into the test thinking like all capitals or not, or what's the rule, you're thinking about that instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing, is thinking about the actual listening, looking at the questions and focusing on that. So what I would suggest to people is take the advice that we gave Isha, is just write it all in capitals, make that decision and remove that thought process from test day. So just write it all in capitals. That means that you're going to be absolutely fine and you don't have to be worrying about it on test day. And try to do as many of those things, which just removes all thought processes from that decision, or removes all decisions, or removes all worries, and then you can focus on one thing at a time.
Is it actually fine to write it in all caps?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like for example, London has to have a capital letter at the beginning, and if you write London small case, it's wrong.
Okay, so if you write L capital and then the rest in small, it's fine, right?
Yeah, all capitals is fine, but small case and then small case ONDON is wrong. So all caps, they can't say, oh, you didn't capitalize the first letter.
Wow.
So you avoid that risk of not capitalizing the right letters.
Interesting.
So tip number 5 is always read the instructions carefully, especially when it talks about word count. Priyanka, you had this problem. Can you talk us through what the issue was?
I used to have trouble with the one word and / or a number. I couldn't quite understand it. But then once I learned how to work around that, it made it a lot easier.
Yeah. So we're going to teach the audience the exact same technique that we taught you, and it's going to be super easy once you understand this. So before we show you that technique, it's just important to tell you at the beginning that every word counts. So for example, airport isn't 2 separate words, that's one word, but the airport is 2 words. So some people think the or a or an, like articles, don't count, but the airport would be 2 words. The only exception to that rule is hyphenated words. For example, examiner, hyphenated, that would be 1 word. So all words count, but be careful with hyphenated words. That is 1 word. So what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you exactly the same thing that I taught Priyanka. So we're going to create a cheat sheet, and that just makes it super clear so that on test day, you know exactly what you're going to do. So Priyanka, where are you from?
India.
Okay, write that down. How many words?
1.
Okay, write that beside it. 1 word. Which city are you from?
New Delhi.
Okay. And how many words?
2.
Okay, write that down. So which terminal did you fly out of to be here today?
Terminal 2.
Okay, so you both created your little cheat sheet. So the good thing about this is it's personal to you. So you have like where you're from, the airport you flew out of, your address, your high school. People at home, just write 2 or 3 things that are very personal to you. One with 1 word in it, one with more than 1 word, and something with like a number and words in it, like an address, or we had terminal 2, like an airport, something like that. And then what you can do is you can go through these questions and you can test using the instructions which ones would be right and which ones would be wrong. So for example, 1 word and or a number. So Mumbai, is that 1 word and or a number? Would that be correct? Yeah, it's 1 word. New Delhi, would that be 1 word and or a number?
No.
Why not?
It's 2 words.
Yeah, it's more than that. What about terminal 2, 1 word and or number? Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. So for this question, it says 1 word only. If you wrote Mumbai, would that be correct?
Yes.
What about Billabong High School? Would that be
No.
correct?
Mm-mm.
No. What about New Delhi, correct?
Mm-mm.
India?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So by personalizing it, you're removing all of the confusion and making it super simple. So try that at home and it should make it much, much clearer. As a thank you for watching the video, I would like to offer you our free ebook. It's more than 200 pages and it's called the Complete IELTS Preparation Guide. It includes all the strategies you need, including all of the IELTS listening strategies for every type of question. If you want that, all you have to do is go to the description, click on the link, and we will send it to you for free. Tip number 6 is probably the most important one. It sounds super obvious, but it is the most important one for a reason. And it is, your job is to find the correct answer. Now you might think like, of course that's the correct answer, but most students don't do that. They think that they have multiple jobs on test day. So let's talk about that. During the test, you had a big problem. What was your problem that you had on test day that stopped you finding the correct answer?
I couldn't understand what some of the words mean, and that put me in a lot of I wasn't sure if I was writing the right answer because I was too focused on finding a meaning of these words rather than actually looking for the answer, which was wasting a lot of time.
Good. And did you have the same problem?
Yeah. If I didn't understand even one word, I would feel like I'm not understanding the complete context of what I was reading. So even the rest of it that I would understand would be compromised because I didn't understand that one word.
Yeah. So this is why I say your job is to find the correct answer. The listening test is not a test of can you understand every single word in the recording. When you move to a foreign country, there will be multiple words that come out of people's mouths and new slang and new idioms and things like that that you've no idea what they're saying. So it is testing your ability to cope with that, to find the correct answer, even though there are some words that you don't understand. And if I listen to the IELTS listening test, there's some words that I don't understand, and that's fine. There will always be new words. But what we're going to teach you and what we'll teach people at home is how to cope with that, how to cope with unknown words and still find the correct answer. Okay, so there's 2 strategies that we taught these students, and because they were struggling with the same problem. First strategy, how did you deal with when you heard an unknown word?
I would just ignore it. If I felt like I couldn't understand one word, the best strategy for me was to just ignore it and listen to everything else with the same amount of focus.
Yeah.
And try to find the answer with the other information that I had and not get tripped up on that one word.
So most of the time, that will be successful because you don't need to understand every single word. And if the answer reveals itself, then you can just, as I say, let it go. But some of the time, you will need to use the strategy that we taught you and you liked it more, which was?
What I do is I try to find the meaning of the word from the context of the paragraph.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'll try to read it one more time and try to understand what it could potentially mean.
Yeah. And this is something that we do every day as language learners. If we are surrounded by people speaking that language, there will often be 1 or 2 words that we don't really understand and we need to guess from the context. So let me show you, for example. So I'm just going to take a random book, open it at a random page, and I'm going to read a random sentence, but I'm going to leave out one of the words and you're going to guess what that word is. So, contrary to popular and behavior, conflict is not a bad thing for a team. Belief? Wisdom. It's the same thing. What you believe, wisdom is what you understand about your knowledge. So yeah, very, very close. But if you put contrary to popular belief and behavior, conflict is not a bad thing for a team, would it change the meaning of the sentence?
No, pretty much the same.
Absolutely not. Yeah. But you would understand the meaning. And for a listening test, if that sentence came up and you're like, wisdom, I don't understand what wisdom is. So you could guess what it means. It means understanding, knowledge, what people believe about it. So this is a really important skill to develop because it not only makes your listening tests much, much easier, it will improve your vocabulary at the same time. And vocabulary is important for speaking and writing, but it's also important for reading and listening, because the wider your vocabulary, the more you'll be able to understand in the reading and the listening. So it's super important that you do this, and you can do it by doing things that you love. So pick reading or listening. If you struggle with listening, I would recommend listening, but pick something you enjoy doing. So that could be a podcast about, for me, business. For you, it would be serial killers.
Serial killers. Yeah.
For you, that would be
spirituality.
So I'm sure there's 100 different podcasts on spirituality. There's probably 10,000 on serial killers, and there's a few on business. So what you would do is listen to that, obviously in English. So you're going to be enjoying yourself while you're doing it. But every time you hear a new word, it's important to not look that up immediately in the dictionary. What you should do is think about, what does that word actually mean? Think about it first. You could write it down on a piece of paper. You could have a little notebook with you. Then listen back. So listen back to that sentence or that paragraph and try and guess the meaning of that word. Only then, once you have guessed, look up the word in the dictionary, and what you will find, it is as often exactly the same or very, very close to what you thought it was. So this is going to massively improve your vocabulary and improve your listening at the same time, whilst you're doing something you would do anyway, because you're going to be listening to things about serial killers. You're going to be listening to spirituality anyway. So you may as well improve your English skills at the same time. And that's what you guys did.
Yeah. And it develops your skill to, or your confidence to be able to figure out when you do it 10 times, you feel more confident to find the meaning of a word from the context, because you've done it already and you're like, what could that mean?
Yeah.
You know, so
especially if you're moving to an English speaking country and you're working in that job, some bosses are lovely, but some bosses don't care that English isn't your first language, and they will say it once, and if you don't get it, then you might get in trouble with them. So it gives you that confidence that even if someone in my work, or maybe you're dealing with a client and they say something you don't understand, you could just rely on that skill. So it's not just improving your listening, your vocabulary, but your confidence as well. So,
and one thing I used to struggle from is I used to not be able to remember the meaning of that new word that I learned. So there's this trick that I use. I try to mentally explain it to a child, and as if like I'm explaining to them what it means, and that's how I remember it forever.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. Because if you can explain something to a child, you can explain something to anyone.
And then it sticks by you always.
And for bonus points, get yourself a new notebook. So you have a spelling notebook and you have a vocabulary notebook, and record all the new words and add any details that will help you remember it. Not just meanings, but some people like pictures, some people like full sentences or like funny sentences, or some people like synonyms. So a list of synonyms or antonyms, the opposite to that word. I like that for some, I don't know why. Maybe it's how my brain works. I like to know what is the opposite of that word, and that helps me remember it. And then do things like create a story with it, or you might be, when you're practicing your essays, try and include some of those words so you're actually using it. There's a huge difference between words you know and words you know how to use. Using them is going to massively, it's basically moving words from your passive vocabulary, words you know, to your active vocabulary. I don't know the exact numbers. Maybe someone in the comments can tell me, but I think it's like people know 10 times the number of words in their passive vocabulary compared to the words they can actually use in their active vocabulary.
Really?
Yeah. For example, if we got, like, none of us are medical professionals. If we got a medical textbook, we would know most of the words in there, the technical jargon, medical terms, but we wouldn't be able to use most of them in a sentence properly. Like
Right.
I know what that means, but then if we tried to use them properly in a sentence, we'd sound really silly to a
struggle with
doctor.
it. Yeah.
And the same with anything. So it's really important that you do that. But another little tip in the speaking test, I know this isn't the speaking, but try to steer the conversation to topics that you feel very confident about. So if you're a doctor, try and steer it towards medical discussions, because you'll be able to use very impressive vocabulary from your active vocabulary. Tip number 7 is to prepare your answers before you hear the recording. So when you are doing the test, you will have a few minutes normally to look at the questions like these ones here and prepare your answers. So what do I mean by that exactly? There's certain techniques you can use that massively increase your chances of getting the correct answer and reduce stress and reduce the biggest fear that a lot of people have in the listening test, which is getting lost. So it helps manage that. And I actually tested this on myself. What I did was I did 2 listening tests. One, I didn't look at the questions and I didn't prepare any of the answers, and I just did it kind of blind in that way, if that's the right terminology. Another one, I did it normally. I prepared the answers and I got a band 7 the first time and a band 9 the second time. So it shows like a native English speaker would even struggle if they don't prepare first. So think about that from your perspective. How many bands are you losing because you're not preparing for the questions coming up? Okay, so we're going to work on this question together. We're going to think about how we would use this technique of preparing before you hear the recording, what we would do. So the first thing that we would do, what's the first thing that we do when we see this question?
The type of question.
Yep, that's important. But if you look at it and think, this is this type of question, you can automatically think, okay, I need to use this strategy, or this is this type of question coming up. So that's the first step. So the second thing we would do is
Read the instructions.
Why is that important?
Because it's going to give you essential information, the do's and don'ts, and what you have to make sure to get right.
So the first thing we would say here is complete the sentences below, so we know our job. So it's telling us exactly what to do. That might sound super obvious, but on test day, when the recording's rolling and you're under stress, people just don't know what to do. So just like focus in on that, complete the sentences. Okay, the next thing, no more than 2 words. What does no more than 2 words mean?
2 or less.
Exactly.
Okay.
So would 1 word be okay?
Yes.
Would 2 words be okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's only 1 or 2. So now we know what question is coming up. We know exactly what to do, and we know how many words or numbers we need to write. So we're preparing ourselves that way. What's the third thing you should do?
Understand the context. So what are the words? What do they mean? What's the basic general gist?
Yeah, like all human brains need context. So if I say one thing in one context and one thing in a different context, it means completely different things.
Yeah.
So we need to understand the context. So if we have a look at this one, if we look at all the sentences, so we have natural gas, we have source of electricity, carbon output, solar, nuclear power plants, Bill Gates. So what's the context of this? What topic are we talking about?
Energy, sustainable energy, fuel.
Yeah. Energy, renewable energy, non-renewable energy,
yeah.
all of those different things. So we're preparing our brains for this, and our brains can make better sense of everything if we understand the context. So the fourth thing that we should do to prepare,
what type of word it is, if it's a noun coming up, or adjectives or verbs.
Yeah. So let's look at this second sentence. The source of electricity, which has a carbon output lower than solar something.
Solar energy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
simple.
energy is a noun. Yeah. Or if we look at this one, the only form of energy less popular than nuclear is, what type of word is that going to be?
It would be not a verb, not a noun actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not an adjective, not a verb, not an adverb. So
yeah, and we could go even further and say it's probably like wind or coal or gas or some type of energy. And then the final one, Bill Gates is developing advanced reactors in probably a country. Maybe if it's America, it could be a state, or it could be the ocean, or it could be, but it's definitely going to be a noun, but it's probably going to be a country or a place or something like that. So again, we're preparing our brains by understanding context, the type of word, noun, verb, adjective, the category of word. Is it could be a country, could be a state, could be a place, it could be a type of energy. So it's making it us much more likely to get the correct answer. And some of these, you could guess the correct answer without even listening. So it makes the listening much, much easier. Once we do all of that, the final thing that we can do is
predict the correct answer.
Okay. So if we have a look at this one, the source of electricity, which has a carbon output lower than solar, what do you think is a good
Wind.
prediction? wind, other than solar, is wind. Okay, it couldn't be is wind energy because that would be 3 words. Remember, it has to be under 2 words.
Oh,
But
I thought is already in there.
no, is
Oh.
is not. So let's go is wind for you.
Tidal.
Okay, is tidal. Let's have a look at the answers. So the answer is nuclear. So you said wind, you said tidal. We were both wrong, but that doesn't matter because you remember the thing that we're doing here is preparing our brain. So I'm listening out for a source of energy that is lower than solar. So it probably says in the recording, the only other source of electricity that has a lower carbon output than solar is nuclear. So you would hear that much, much easier, even though your prediction was wrong, because it's not about predicting the correct answer. It's about predicting the type of thing that is going to come up and preparing our brains for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So at home, if you're using prediction and you're like, I'm not getting it exactly correct every time, that's not the point. The point is preparing our brain to find the correct answer, because we can't predict everyone exactly, but some of them you will be able to do it. Most of them, your predictions will be wrong, but the type of word and the topic and preparing our brains to find the correct answer, that's what we want to be doing. So good job. Tip number 8 is all about focus. And this is a big one because a lot of people have great listening skills or English might be at a very, very high level, but they struggle with focus. And because the recording is just going to keep going, if you lose focus, you're going to lose marks. And this actually happened to me when I did the real IELTS test. At the beginning of the test, I was looking out the window thinking about what I was going to have for dinner that evening. Didn't even realize the recording had started. And I think it was a number plate. And I completely missed it. And I didn't get the correct answer at all. I still got a band 9 because you can get one question wrong and still get a band 9. But it just shows you how important focus is, not even at the end of the test, but throughout the whole test. And we taught you 2 different strategies. And we're going to talk about that, and that'll help the people at home. So we taught you one technique. What was it?
So instead of trying to be able to pay attention, my attention used to be really bad. I used to have a hard time focusing on something for 60 minutes straight. So instead of trying to do all 60 minutes together, I kind of think of it as working a muscle in the gym. So you kind of do it a little bit at a time. So you try to do it first for 5 minutes, then 10. Then when you get used to the 10, you go to a 15. When you get used to 15, you go to 20. And then it kind of becomes muscle memory in a way. So rather than trying to give yourself the mammoth task of doing 60 minutes in one go, it's just, for me, at least it worked easier to be able to do it section by section and work up your attention span.
And we did something a little bit different with you. What did we do?
I used to find it really hard to focus. So I started meditating. And I found out that it really helps me get a lot of data in my brain. So what I used to do is I started off meditating for like 2 minutes in the beginning. I couldn't do it more than that. And then I jumped on to 6 and then 10 and then for a half an hour. And that helped me a lot. And that's something I use now to better my attention span.
And the good thing about meditation is it gives people a little bit of a break from studying.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Because a lot of people, not saying any of you viewers would do this, but a lot of people email us the week before their test and they're like, I need to cram, I need to prepare for the test in 1 week, and they're studying like crazy. And it's too much, to be honest, for most people. So meditation not only improves your focus, but gives you a break from study and kind of, as you said, like a data dump, like allows you to clear out your brain a little bit. So if you're struggling with focus and you want a way of doing it while chilling out at the same time, and it's beneficial in a lot of other ways, meditation is good. There's lots of meditation apps out there. Don't ask me which one, just find one and go with it. And finally, but most importantly, my best tip for staying focused throughout the entire test is reducing as much stress on test day as possible. The number one way to reduce stress is preparation. When people say stress, what I really hear is fear. They have fear that they're not going to do well, are you so fearful? Because deep down, you know you haven't put the work in and you're not prepared. But when I go and do the test, I know that I've done the work. When my VIP students go and do the test, we know that they've done everything that they can. The best way to do that is understand the different questions, understand the strategies for the different questions, and download the PDF. It has all of that for you. Tip number 8 is called the shark strategy. So some species of shark need to keep moving, and if they don't move, water doesn't go into their gills, they don't get oxygen, and they die. They literally need to move in order to survive. This is exactly the same in the IELTS listening test. You need to keep moving in order to get one of the higher scores. If you stop, you lose focus, or you focus in on a question or focus on a word you don't understand, and you stop following the recording, you're dead. So you need to keep going and you need to follow the recording. Tip number 9 is a really surprising one that I didn't think most students would have a problem with. But when we looked at your answers, you had that problem, which was some of the questions you didn't even have an answer for them. And surprisingly, some of the multiple choice ones you didn't have an answer for at all. Why is that not the best strategy, especially for multiple choice and things like that?
Because you still have a 25% chance of getting it right if you just close your eyes and pick one. So stupid to be leaving it blank.
So we don't want to use that strategy for every question. We want to approach every question in a strategic way and find the correct answer. But if it's something like multiple choice and you just have no idea, if you are like, I have just no idea, get stressed and then lose your place and you don't use the shark strategy, you're going to mess up the rest of your test. But as you say, you might have a 25% chance. Just put a random one down if you really have no idea, or look at the 4 options. If you have prepared, as we said before, prepared before you hear, one of the options or 2 of the options will probably make sense. And even sentence completion, like we looked at, often you'll be able to guess the answer. So if you lose your place or lose focus, for example, you could have put, wind power in, or is wind. It might not be right, but how many different types of power are there? There's nuclear, there's wind, there's tidal, there's coal. Again, you still have a 25% chance. Don't use this for every single question. You're not going to do very well, but those questions where you get stuck and you need to move on, try that strategy.
And there's no negative marking, so it makes sense. Nothing to lose.
Yeah, you have nothing to lose. We solved a lot of your problems just with spelling and that one tip. And then everything became much, much easier for you. And then the last tip is all about accents. This is something that you had a problem with because some of the accents on the test, you were unfamiliar with them. So on test day, you might hear not just English accents. I think a lot of you listen to like the received pronunciation English accent, the BBC News accent, but that's not real life. A tiny percentage of people in the UK actually speak like that. Some of them speak like me from Northern Ireland. You might get a Scottish accent on the test. You might get a Welsh accent, a South African one. There's multiple different American accents, Canadian accents, Australian, New Zealand. You need to familiarize yourself with those. You don't need to be an expert on them. You just need to kind of tune into it. And how did you overcome the accent problem?
I used to watch a lot of news anyway, so I tried switching it to different countries. And I would watch their news in different accents, and also podcasts helped me a lot. I listened to them anyway, so I would try to look up channels which are from different countries, but they're speaking in English. So I can get a hold of the accent that they're talking in and understand what they're saying.
And you combine that strategy with the strategy that we talked about before about understanding words in context that you don't understand first time. So one time you could listen to an Australian podcast on something you like, and then the next one on an American one, and the next one on an Irish one. So you're listening to something you enjoy listening to, you're improving your accent recognition, you're getting familiar with those different accents, and you're improving your listening skills and your vocabulary all at the same time. So podcasts are your best friend. So now you understand which tips and strategies to use for listening. The next part of this video will cover everything you need to know about the different tips and strategies for reading. Which ones improve your score, which ones will lower your score. We're going to take you through everything step by step. Tip number 1. 1 strategy or 11 strategies. So when you open the book and you're looking at the different questions, should you have 11 strategies or 1 strategy for each question?
I think 1 strategy, just to keep it simple.
Maybe 11 different strategies, even if they're slightly different, so that you can have a different, unique approach according to what the question is. And you can adjust and play along depending on what you're being asked.
Let's see who's right and who's wrong, and we'll help everyone watching at home. So let's look at each of the strategies in a little bit more detail, and we'll find out what's like IDP and the British Council have to say. So if you type in to YouTube, IELTS reading tips and tricks, the first video that comes up, their first tip is the most important one. And their first tip says, understand the 11 different question types. So it doesn't say which strategy to use, but it says that it's important to understand the different question types. And this is totally true. So there's many, many different question types. And often students, like strong students like yourself, who are very, very good at English, maybe get a band 9 in speaking, sometimes they can go and do the real reading test and they can mess it up because they're like, what is true, false, not given? What is matching headings? Normally people are used to like multiple choice or comprehension. These are completely new to them. So you should definitely familiarize yourself with the different types of questions. On the other end of the spectrum, there's this video with millions of views. And what it says is, I first read the question and then I start quickly reading the text, not paying attention to any detail. And when I feel okay, the answer is somehow here. I slow down, I carefully read the sentence. I read the second question, I resume reading the text. And this strategy allows me to finish my reading section much more quickly. And this is probably the more common advice that you'll see on YouTube, and especially on TikTok and Instagram and things like that. Normally what you'll see is a video saying, use this one killer strategy, and it will magically answer all of the questions. Which one is actually true? And if we summarize that strategy, so it was quite vague what they said. Basically, most of these one strategies is skim, so read quickly, then scan for the general location, find generally where it is, and then read that area carefully, find the correct answer.
Okay.
Sounds very simple, and normally I like simple things, but is it actually correct? Does it actually help you find the correct answer? Okay, so what we're going to do is you both have the same matching headings question. So I've given you this strategy, which is the one strategy that you can use for any question. And I've given you matching heading strategy. I'm going to try you first, see how effective it is. So what I want you to do is go to section A. So down below, section A. And I want you just to skim it very, very quickly. All right, so I'm going to give you 10 seconds to skim it. Now what I want you to do is I want you to scan that to find information that will lead to the correct answer. I'm going to give you 20 seconds to do that. Now I want you to read carefully and find the correct answer. Have a look, and you can look at the question. You can read carefully. Go ahead. Or are you completely lost?
I am completely lost.
Oh, okay.
Like
So does this work, this strategy that you just used?
No. Not at all.
So let's do it all together.
Okay.
We'll do the exact same question, but we'll use a specific strategy designed for this question. Okay? So what I want you to do is don't look at the list of headings, okay? Just look at section A. All I want you to do is read section A and imagine you are writing a title for that paragraph. So a title that just summarizes what that paragraph means. Think about if you were writing a newspaper article just about that paragraph, what would the title say? I want you to do it separately. I'll give you 1 minute to do that.
Should we write it down? Or?
Write it down.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't say what it is.
Okay.
Just write it down separately. Okay? Done? Okay, can you read yours?
Yeah. How government's involvement can damage environmental management.
So how the government's impact or involvement in the environment, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah? And yours? Similar?
Impact, but positive. So how can a government contribute positively to environmentalism?
Okay. So if we look at the two sentences, the commonalities are government and environment. All right, so government is doing something on the environment. Now what I would like you to do is go back to the list of headings. So it's up to the list of headings. And I want you just to look at them and identify any that match your title, any that match your heading. Go up the page until it says key to sample task. What did you get?
5.
What did you get?
Woohoo! 5.
Was that difficult?
No, it
Was
so
it difficult
nice.
the first time?
Yes, very difficult.
Interesting.
It also saved a lot of time. It was very quick
Exactly.
compared to the first time.
Exactly. I gave you 1 minute. You probably wouldn't even need 1 minute. You could have read through that quite quickly and just like government's impact on environment, like government's involvement in environment. And then if you look, it's like magic. There's not much magic in the IELTS test, and I don't believe in magic tricks, but that's as close to a magic trick as you're going to get. So if we have a look at what the British Council say about this, they don't talk about having separate strategies, but if you look at the British Council website, on there you'll find teaching plans made for teachers, all created by very, very experienced British Council teachers. And the interesting thing about this is they have separate lesson plans for each different type of question. And that's exactly the way we taught at the British Council. We would have a lesson for matching headings questions and a lesson for true, false, not given, and a lesson for comprehension questions, because it's testing different skills and requires a different strategy. And it actually states on the British Council website is that each question is testing different reading sub-skill. So the skill that particular question was testing was, can you look at a paragraph and understand the general main idea of it? Like when you're reading a newspaper, most people don't read every word. They just look through it. Okay, that paragraph means that paragraph means that, quite quickly. That's what it's testing. And this is backed up by the Cambridge website. And Pauline Cullen, a very famous and well-respected IELTS teacher and author, and she says every question has one clear purpose to force you to use specific reading skills. In other words, each question is forcing you to do different things, so you need a different strategy for each type of question. As a thank you for watching this video, I want to offer you our free ebook. It's more than 200 pages of our best strategies. It also includes reading strategies for every single reading question. If you want that, all you have to do is go to the description, click on that link, and you can download it for free. So again, am I attacking teachers? No, I'm not attacking anybody who teaches this, all right? If you are one of the teachers who teaches this strategy, think about why you're doing it. Students love simple strategies that cut down on time. This is why you'll find it on things like TikTok and Instagram, because people just want, quick fixes. Try to balance what your students want and what they need. What they want is to make everything as simple as possible, and I'm a big believer in making things as simple as possible, but only as possible. It's impossible to make these as simple as this. You need to be a little bit more complicated. But if you find a strategy anywhere on the internet, always test it in the classroom with students, just like I did. So that was a very quick demonstration of you could get this one strategy, test it with your students, and they're going to be completely lost, and then use a different one and they find the answers pretty easily. Which one wins? Base it on real student results that you're with students in the classroom. But maybe I just got lucky and it only works for matching headings. What about a more difficult question like true, false, not given? Let's see if it actually works there. So that brings us on to the second tip for reading. We're going to test true, false, not given questions versus this. Really understanding the question, fully understanding it, or using tricks. Some students and some teachers just want tricks. Some of them work, some of them don't. Other teachers, other students want to fully understand the question, so they're completely confident on test day. So which one would you choose?
I would say understand.
Okay, why?
Just a more bulletproof approach. If you understand it, it's harder for you to go wrong than if you blindly follow a trick and it takes you down the wrong road.
What about you?
I really like the way you taught us a trick for the last question. I think if you can give us something similar for the true or false and not given, it would be really nice.
Okay, so let's see which approach is actually correct. So if we go to one of the most popular YouTube videos on true, false, not given. Her approach is to help students understand the difference between true, false, and not given. So what she says in the video is, if it is true, the statement agrees with the information. If it is false, the statement contradicts the information. And if it is not given, there is no information on this. This video was posted nearly a decade ago, and IELTS has not changed since. But since that, there's been lots and lots and lots of videos talking about this is the latest hack, this is the latest trick. But maybe we got the answer nearly 10 years ago in this video. And you'll also find the exact same information on the IDP website. So if you have a look at the IDP website, it says exactly the same thing. So if the most popular video on YouTube is stating something very, very clearly, and IDP you're stating it so clearly, why is there so much confusion? True, false, not given is probably the question that we get the most emails about, just saying like, I have no idea, I really fear this question. And it messes up a lot of people because they get very stressed out. And they're like, if I get one of these questions, I'm going to fail, and that can actually cause failure in itself. If you put into the search bar, IELTS reading, true, false, not given, tips and tricks, the titles of the videos that come up, if you have a look, what do you see? You see magic way, magic tricks, true tips, secret tips. This is why there's so much confusion, because there's so much information. And I'm not saying any of those videos are right or wrong, but they all contradict each other, and there's so much conflicting information. So students get even more confused when really the correct answer is understanding the difference between true, false, and not given. And I'm going to show you very easily how to understand the difference between true, false, not given in a second. But I just want to address something important. I'm not saying that you need to just focus on one strategy with us, but what I would recommend is, instead of looking at 30 different YouTube channels or 10 different blogs, find one that you actually trust. Like, so for example, we've mentioned Pauline Cullen, very, very reputable, reliable source, or IELTS Liz or IELTS Simon. These are people who really, really know what they're doing. Or you could look at our website or our channel. Hopefully you would agree that we know what we're doing, but pick one of us and just focus on that. And that is going to cure this overwhelm problem that many of you have. So if we have a look at again what it says in this video, number one, if it is true, the statement agrees with this information. Number two, if it is false, the statement contradicts this information. And number three, if it is not given, there's no information on this. When we tell students this, they like look at me kind of blank the way you're looking at me right now. And the way that we overcome that is we personalize these statements. So we get them to create like a little personal fact sheet, and then they create true statements, false statements, and not given statements. This helps people truly understand it. So we're going to do this with both of you. So what I would like you to do is, on the piece of paper, I would like you to write name and write your name. Nationality. City of residence, your age, and your profession. Now, based on this, I want you to write a true statement about yourself, a memorable true statement about yourself. If it was me, I would say Chris is a citizen of Ireland. That is a true statement. Or Chris is a teacher. Many people will disagree with that. Okay, what is yours?
Isha lives in London.
Okay, is that true?
Yes.
And yours?
Priyanka is a teacher.
Okay, is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. What I want you to do now is write a false statement that somebody could look at the fact sheet and say, this is false because it contradicts what is in the fact sheet.
Mine is Isha is 25 years old
Why is that false?
because Isha is 23 years old.
Mine is Priyanka is 35 years old
Why is that false?
because she is 27.
Okay. What I'm going to do now is we're going to create a not given statement. So a not given statement is a statement that we just cannot tell. There's no information there that we can verify is this true or false. So looking at your fact sheet, could someone look at the fact sheet and then look at that statement and say that's true or false? Did you live in West London?
No, it's probably not given.
Yeah, there's no information
Yeah.
about the location within London. So you wrote, Priyanka likes chocolate cake. Can we tell from the information whether you like chocolate cake or
It's not given.
Yeah, not at all. So it's either something that's closely related to what is in your fact sheet. So you live in London, but it's not really clear where, or it's just something that is not there at all, like which food you like. On test day, what you can think is, if you're confused about true, false, not given, you can just remember that fact sheet and those 3 statements, and then think about what you're doing when you're looking at the different statements. And that should make it super duper clear. And anybody at home can make that in 5 minutes, and that should make it clear to you. And that's the biggest challenge for most people, is understanding the difference between true, false, not given. And that little fact sheet technique removes that biggest problem and makes it much easier.
These strategies are great, but my problem is that I can't finish the test on time.
Yep, that brings us to our final tip,
Okay.
which is skimming and scanning, or use a strategy. All right, so a lot of people use time management tips that are all around skimming and scanning, and then other people use strategy to make sure that they get everything done on time. So we're going to compare both of these and see which one is the winner. So skimming and scanning, they're skills. They are reading skills. Skimming is reading quickly to understand the general meaning, and scanning is like if you go to the cinema, you don't read every single time. You scan, okay, where's Superman? Okay, what time? 5 p.m. Okay, you didn't read every single movie. You just find a keyword, and that finds the location of where you want to go. Same with reading the phone book. You don't start with A. You would scan to where you're going, skip to where you're going, and then, or when we did have phone books, but you might be too young.
What's that? What's a phone book?
I'm showing my age. But I think this is one of the most misunderstood areas, and a lot of people see tips on YouTube of just like skim and scan, and you'll quickly find the correct answer, and that will mean you get everything done on time. Let's see if that is actually true. So if we look at this very, very popular IELTS tips video with millions of views, her first tip is don't read slowly. You should just skim and get the main idea, and then scan and get the detail. And then she also says don't spend too much time reading the passages. You'll find this again and again and again. Just skim, scan, find the correct answer. All very quick, all good, but is this actually the case? So if we go to the IDP website and look at an article there called How to Skim and Scan for Keywords in Your IELTS Test, it states, in order to help you decrease the amount of time it takes to complete the reading section of the IELTS test, you need to practice using skimming and scanning techniques. So far so good. IDP says that these are skills you should be using, but what they're saying is they're just tools. And like any tool, you can use a hammer or a saw, but if you use it incorrectly or use it the wrong way, then you might be in trouble. Like you can't use a hammer to cut a piece of wood. You can't use a saw to hammer in a nail. So you need to think about them a little bit more strategically. Like, when do I use skimming and when do I use scanning? So if we go back to Cambridge, the Cambridge website, Pauline Cullen's article, she says every question has one clear purpose: to force you to use specific reading skills. So telling students, don't read slowly, just skim, and don't spend too much time reading the passages, is actually poor advice. It ignores the most important skill, which is actually close reading, or some people call this reading for detail. So not skimming, not scanning, actually finding the correct answer or where the correct answer might be, and really reading in detail and taking the time to fully understand that. That's why a lot of students use skimming and scanning but still get lost, because your job at the end of the day is to find the correct answer, not to just get through things as quickly as possible. So which one is the winner? Should we just skim and scan and try and do everything as quickly as possible, or should we use strategy?
Strategy.
Why?
Always better to understand something than just try to skim and do it focusing just on time.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with her.
And the other thing that you might not think about is, okay, skimming and scanning sounds like a shortcut, but what happens if you get lost on a shortcut? It turns into a long cut. So by trying to do things quickly and use magic tricks and magic hacks, you can get lost in the reading. Like we seen at the beginning of the video when we tried that technique with you, you were just completely lost. So by trying to give people shortcuts, you can often create long cuts. So anything that doesn't focus on helping you find the correct answer, even if it is quick or fast or helps with time management, doesn't actually help in the long run.
Understood.
So now you know which tips and strategies to use for the listening and reading test. The next part of this video covers speaking. We will do it with the same Band 9 students, and we will show you exactly which speaking tips and strategies improve your score and which ones lower your score. Let's start off with one of the most popular speaking tips. I want you to watch each of these students start the test and think about what tip they might be using. Welcome to the IELTS speaking test. Please sit down.
Hi, how are you? My name is Priyanka Bhatia. Very nice to meet you, Chris. I was really looking forward to coming today. You have a really nice examination hall. Is that what you call it? Let me give you my ID. How's your day been so far?
Not bad.
Would you like something to eat or drink?
Let's start.
You look
the exam.
amazing, by the way. I really like your shirt.
Okay.
Your haircut.
Okay.
It's so good.
Thank you. Welcome to the IELTS speaking test. Please sit down. May I see your ID, please? So did you spot the tip? If you go online, you'll find thousands of tips on how to greet the examiner. But does greeting the examiner actually improve your score? Does it affect it in any way? So guys, if you look at the guidance from IELTS, it talks about part 1 and what happens in part 1. So the examiner will ask you about yourself and general questions like work, family, studies, things like that. But before part 1, you have to come in and you have to talk to the examiner. They'll just ask your name. They'll ask to see your ID, and this is where you will greet the examiner in some way, maybe a little bit differently to how you just demoed it.
Yeah.
But that's when you will greet them. But the most important thing to know is you're not being assessed at this point. We call this part 0. So you have part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 0 is when you come in, you talk to the examiner for the first time, they look at your ID, they ask your name, all of those things, but the exam has not started yet. It's really important to understand that. But many people online think that what you do in that first part actually does improve your score. So let's see what the official IELTS website and the official sources have to say about it. So on the official IELTS website, it says, every examiner is trained and monitored closely to be fair to every candidate and to assess your level of English. The examiners will not give you more or fewer marks if you are smiling and laughing. So it's quite clear what they're saying there is it doesn't matter what you do in that part 0, it's not going to improve your score. So you can't charm the examiner, you can't be overly friendly. And if you're really nervous, like you demonstrated, and you don't seem like you don't want to be there, you can't lose marks for being unfriendly.
But I imagine it doesn't do any harm to be polite, to be nice, right?
So yes and no. Whatever helps you relax into the test and reduces nerves and stress as much as possible. Like if you are the type of person that not greeting the examiner in a friendly way would make you feel awkward, and you would be thinking about like, have I actually offended them? Then, greet the examiner in a normal human way. But I think that, and this is advice for the teachers out there, if you are giving students advice on how to greet the examiner, you're not giving time to things like grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, fluency, strategy, how to answer the questions. There's a finite amount of time that teachers have to teach students and students have to prepare for the exam. So if you are dedicating, even just 10 or 15 minutes, showing students exactly what to say to the examiner, then you're not spending that 10 or 15 minutes giving them feedback on things that actually matter. So on a more strategic level, I'm not criticizing teachers out there, I'm trying to help you. Only focus on the things that are actually being tested when they are being tested, and that is giving your students the best possible chance. So is this tip right or wrong? I think that it's wrong. It's not going to do any harm, but there are far more important things that you need to think about, and we'll talk about that later in this video. So we're going to demo the second most popular tip. I want you to watch both of them. Both of them are trying to use this same tip. Watch what they do and try and guess what the tip is. Welcome to the IELTS speaking test. Let's start off by talking about what you normally do on the weekend. What do you normally do on the weekend?
I like to meet my friends on the weekend. We like to go for long walks in the park. And I like to go shopping. and I like to go to the garden with them, and I like to meet them outside their house.
What do you normally like to do on the weekends?
On the weekends, I literally love to cook, and I love inviting all my friends over to my house so we can like eat together and watch a movie. And like I have this really big screen TV, so we really enjoy watching like horror movies over there. And I think it's the best thing to do on the weekends.
So did you spot what the tip was? So one of the most popular YouTube videos in the world on IELTS speaking, with 13 million views, talks about how important body language is, and hand gestures, and maintaining eye contact. But is this actually true? Will this improve your score? Well, let's have a look what IDP and the British Council have to say about this. On IDP's website, you'll find an article called How to Prepare for the IELTS Speaking Test. And in it, it says that every examiner is trained and monitored closely to be fair to every candidate and to assess your level of English. The examiners will not give you more or fewer marks if you are smiling and laughing. It is best to relax as much as you can and communicate in a natural way. So what it's saying there is, and this is consistent with examiner training, what they train the examiners on is grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, fluency. What comes out of your mouth, not really your hand gestures, your eye contact, your body language. But some people think that, you know, body language does have an impact on those things, that it can improve pronunciation, fluency, grammar, vocabulary. Is that actually true? And I found an interesting article on the IDP website called 9 Myths About the IELTS Speaking Test to Debunk. And this is what they say. Being polite, courteous, and smiling should be part of basic manners when engaging with anyone in a conversation. It does help the interaction move forward. However, it is not part of the evaluation criteria. You should not worry about being overly polite, but focus on the conversation and topic at hand. We can also look at this video by the British Council where it says students are not assessed on appearance or body language.
But if you have confident body language, isn't it going to help you speak more better?
So I think it really depends on the teacher. And again, this is some advice for teachers out there. When I look at a lot of the feedback that is given to students in one-on-one speaking mock tests, some of them, 80% of the feedback is on hand gestures, body language, eye contact. And to the teachers out there, the students are trusting you. They're not IELTS experts. So if you do a mock speaking test with them, or in the classroom, you're giving feedback and you're talking about those things, the students will automatically think these are important and they will focus on them. And then they will not focus on the really important things, which are grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and fluency. So it is about choosing what you teach the students so that the students understand the importance of each thing, or what is more important than the other. So be very, very careful when you mention things like body language, eye contact, hand gestures, because the students will prioritize them because you are prioritizing them in the classroom. But does it affect your score? No, not at all. So what I would say is you do whatever you want to do that helps you speak fluently and give the best answers. But do realize that 100% of your score is based on the official marking criteria, and IDP, the British Council, say that it doesn't matter at all. So prioritize that. So let's move on to tip number 3, a very, very popular one. What we're going to do is one student is going to use this tip and the other one is going to ignore this tip and not use it at all. I want you to spot which one is which and think about what tip they might be using. What's the best way for an English student to improve their listening skills?
I think documentaries, docuseries. I love long-form content on serial killers. I know that's quite a niche topic, and that's because I'm very easily stimulated by, this may sound weird, but serial killers. Just something about the psychological imbalance that they have. It may seem gruesome to some people, but to me it's quite fascinating because their thought process is very layered. Their thought process is very nuanced. It's not about good versus evil, as some people might think. It's sometimes that they have a lot of mental disorders that stems from a very troubled childhood. And doing a deep dive into that makes me feel like I'm able to humanize the person and maybe not justify their actions, because it's not okay to kill, but maybe understand the human psyche and cause and effect a lot better than someone that just says someone's evil.
For students who are learning English, what's the best way that they could improve their listening skills?
I feel like if they research IELTS content on probably YouTube, there's a lot of outlets out there where they can brush up on their education. And I feel like that's one of the ways that has helped me a lot. And maybe that's something that they could do.
So did you spot the tip? I want you not to think about just the tip, but how fluent was each person? So if we listen to Priyanka's response, it was very, very impressive, but it wasn't as fluent as she normally is. Why do you think you weren't as fluent? So you were constantly stopping and thinking about what to do. Why was that?
Because I was trying to sound as intelligent and was trying really hard to impress you, rather than just answering the question as I would normally.
Specifically, how were you trying to sound intelligent?
Using big words, intelligent sounding words to be able to make you think that I was more intelligent.
So all over the internet, you'll find advice saying, don't use normal informal language. Just don't use normal everyday language. You need to use more formal, more academic type words, and that is going to improve your score. Let's see if that is actually true. So if we go to the British Council website and have a look at an article there called IELTS Test Format Explained, it states the content of the IELTS speaking test is the same for both the IELTS academic and IELTS general training test. So academic is what university students in general would do, and the general training test is for everybody else. They just want to move to a new country, so it's not like an academic test. So what does that say? That says that the speaking test is for both exactly the same. So it's not like one is, the academic test requires academic language and the general training test requires more general language. That's not what it's saying. It's saying they're exactly the same and they're assessed in exactly the same way. But let's have a look at what IDP say. In a very interesting article on the IDP website is called Formal and Informal English on IELTS. And it starts off with, you want to get band 9 in IELTS? You might think the above sentence will give you a low score on an IELTS test. However, you might be wrong. IELTS tests your English language skills, and yes, this includes both formal and informal English. So again, this confirms what we see all the time, which is the speaking test is not a formal academic test. It is testing your ability to communicate clearly in English. And as we've seen with you, because you were trying to sound more intelligent by using big words, it was actually lowering your fluency score. And you are at a band 9 level, you have perfect fluency, but by trying too hard, it is actually lowering your score. And it's actually a much fairer reflection of speaking in real life, because like when you move to an English speaking country, what percentage of the time are you going to be speaking in a really formal academic way? Like 1% of the time, maybe. It's very specialist when you're using that kind of language. 99% of the time, you're just using everyday informal language. You're also using things like slang, phrasal verbs, idioms, just everyday idiomatic language that native English speakers would use. And that is showing actually how high level you are, because to learn more informal ways of speaking is actually as advanced as using really, really academic language as well. To thank you for watching this video, we want to give you a free gift. This is our complete IELTS preparation guide. This ebook has more than 200 pages of our best strategies, including all the phrases and vocabulary our Band 9 students used in their speaking tests. We analyzed hundreds of Band 9 speaking performances and took out all the key language and put it into this guide. If you want that, all you have to do is go to the description, click on the link, and you can download it for free.
So if I don't use advanced vocabulary, does that mean that I'll get a lower score?
Good question, because that's the next tip we're going to look at, tip number 4. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so tip number 3 was about like academic formal language. Tip number 4 is using more high-level vocabulary, advanced words. And the most common way that this is taught, if you go onto YouTube, if you go and search on Google, is to give students a list of advanced words ask them to memorize them, use them in the test, and this will magically improve their score. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give one of you the actual list from one of the most popular YouTube videos. I'm going to allow you some time to memorize that list, and we're going to ask you to answer a question normally and then using the list. Can you tell me about your home, please, like the house that you live in?
I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in the city center. It's cozy, it's nice. I don't like houses that are too big, so I liked my home for that very reason. My bedroom's quite spacious, quite big for a house in the city center. It's rustic, all neutral colors inspired by Kim Kardashian. And it's just, it's my safe haven. I love the way it feels. It's comfortable.
Can you tell me about your home, like the house that you live in?
My house is where I feel very serene. And it is in a multi-storied building, high-rise skyscraper building. And the artwork in my house is futuristic and very modern, and yeah, my kitchen.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. So how did you feel in both answers? So compare how you felt, what was going through your mind.
When I was speaking normally, the first answer that I gave, I felt like I was just answering a question and having a conversation with a friend. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like I was trying to think about. I was just remembering what my house looks like and telling you about it. But in the second answer, I wasn't really focusing on the truth as much as I was trying to use as many big words to impress you. And then I couldn't think of the big words to impress you because not too many to do with your home. And that made me kind of even more nervous and trip up on my words.
And how did you feel when I stopped you? How would you feel if I kept doing that?
I felt like I knew I was messing up as I was doing it because I was struggling to find the words. And then when you stopped me, I was like, oh, yeah, it hurt my confidence for sure.
Yeah, and that would make your fluency even worse. So it would be a downward spiral.
Yeah, the next question would be worse. Yeah.
And that's exactly what we find when we're training students, that when a student comes in and they have terrible fluency, we can spot it immediately what they're trying to do. Like we will literally just stop them and say like, have you memorized the list? Are you trying to regurgitate that list? And they're like, oh, I don't have to do that. It's like, yeah, just speak normally. And they're so afraid of speaking normally because they think that normal speech means a lower score, but it's the exact opposite. If you're just talking normally, that's what the examiners are actually testing. Like, can you speak normally to people in an English-speaking country? That's exactly what they're testing, so that's what gets higher scores. It is not a vocabulary memorization test. It is a speaking communications test. So let's have a look and just confirm this with the British Council. And in that article called Lexis and Vocabulary, it says many candidates memorize impressive lists of vocabulary, but often end up using them in the wrong way because they haven't understood them properly. So by all means, if you can use a topic-specific high-level word from time to time, like when we were discussing your home, that's fine as long as you know how to use it. But as soon as you start to try and use vocabulary that's beyond your level and you're not comfortable using, that's when it affects your fluency. So you lower your fluency score and your vocabulary score. So you're making vocabulary mistakes and it is lowering your fluency score, which is, doubly wrong.
Double whammy.
Double whammy. Let's see what IDP have to say about this. So in their article 10 Tips IELTS Speaking, they state quite clearly, don't use big and unfamiliar words. Very, very clear what they say. They say you might want to impress the examiner with big and complex words in your speaking test, but to be safe, avoid using words you are not familiar with. There is a higher chance of making mistakes by either mispronouncing words or using them in the wrong context. So we talked about a double whammy, vocabulary and fluency, but pronunciation, that's another 25%, so 75%. And we often find this with students who think that they know the word, but they don't know how to pronounce the word. So the meaning might be wrong, the pronunciation might be wrong, and they've spent like the first few, how do I say this? And then, so you're just making it way more difficult than it needs to actually be.
But vocabulary is a big part of IELTS speaking tests. So if we use simpler words, isn't it going to affect the score?
Yes and no. So there's two approaches that we suggest students do. It's called the moon landing strategy. So during the moon landing, what they would do is before they went to the moon, they would try and break everything. They would take lots of chances and they would stretch all the equipment to breaking point. But once they got to the moon, they played it safe. So during your IELTS preparation, try and stretch your vocabulary as much as possible. Take risks, try and learn new words. But also what you need to realize about vocabulary is the most used words in the English language are common everyday words. And mastering those words are just as important as learning more advanced vocabulary. Like you are both Band 9 speaking students. If we analyze your speaking transcripts, only 5%, say, of the words that you use are C1, C2, like high level words. And that's the same. You can analyze hundreds of Band 9 transcripts from real Band 9 students. 2, 3, 4, 5% of the words are actually high level. But the difference between a Band 6 student and a Band 9 student is a Band 6 student hasn't mastered the lower level words yet, and they're trying to use higher level words at a higher frequency, but unsuccessfully. Whereas a Band 9 student, those A1, A2, B1, B2 level words, they've fully mastered them. They can use them normally without making mistakes. And then from time to time, 4 or 5% of the time, when they need to, they're throwing in one of those higher level words, but only when they 100% know them. And to the teachers out there, I know that many of you give your students long lists of high level words, and that's because your students want them and you think that you're helping them. But always think about what do the students want versus what the students need. Students will tell you they want lists of words, they want samples, they want templates, things like that. But is it actually improving their score? You're not their friend, you're their teacher. You're not there to be popular, you're there to be effective. So by all means, help them sustainably improve their vocabulary, but really do encourage them on test day to only use the vocabulary that will get them a higher score, which is the vocabulary they fully mastered already.
But what about for the common topics? Do you think it's a good idea to memorize bigger vocabulary for those common questions?
Well, that's actually tip number 5. Let's look to see if there are actually any common topics, because if there are, that would help us. So if we look at the IELTS official website, they have an article there called IELTS Speaking Test Topics. And they do give examples of some questions that come up again and again, but they don't give any common topics. And if we look at the IDP website, there's an article which states in part 1, the examiner will ask you about yourself and general questions from common topics like work, family, studies, interests, and hobbies. And this is actually true. You've probably noticed that when we do our mock speaking tests, the first questions are normally every day getting to know you chit-chat questions like your home, your family, your interests, what you do at the weekend. These same topics do come up again and again. But you've probably noticed that I also have asked you guys questions like this. Is music an important subject in schools in your country?
In schools in my country?
Are there any celebrities that you do not like?
Oh.
So can you remember any weird questions that I asked you before?
Weird questions?
Weird topics you weren't expecting?
Will AI replace actual
Yes, that's what I
teachers?
wanted to say as well. Will AI replace teachers?
Yeah, they might ask you something like that, like really quite advanced, like about AI, for example. Or in part 1, they might ask you a completely random topic, like, do you like hats? Or what do you think about birthday cakes? So what we've found and what examiners see every day is when they ask students questions that they're expecting, like tell me about your home, tell me about your family, what do you do at the weekend? They give very good answers because they are prepared for those common topics. The strategy that examiners use is then they'll throw in a random topic. Like, let's talk about birthday cakes. Let's talk about hats. Let's talk about gardening. Let's talk about jewelry. And they will judge your English level really on how you react to those questions that you were not expecting, not the topics that you were expecting. And they will try and see, is there a huge difference between tell me about your family, or do you work or study, and how often do you wear hats? Because that's testing your real English level. So if you go and work in an English speaking country, they're not only going to be asking you about, like, tell me about your family and your career, they'll be asking you about more common topics. And if you can't speak about those rarer topics, then your English level isn't that high. So telling students, prepare for these common topics, it sounds good. Again, if you're a teacher, I'm not criticizing you. It sounds like you're coming from a good place. You have a good heart. You're trying to help your students, but you might actually be leading them towards lower scores, because the key is to prepare them for all topics, not just the common ones that come up again and again in part 1.
So that's part 1. What about part 2 and part 3?
So part 1, there are those common topics. Like, they'll probably start off with this, do you work or do you study? And then talk about either your home or your neighborhood, your likes and dislikes, and then throw in a few random topics. So you need to be prepared for those. Parts 2 and parts 3, there are no common topics. Even if you look online and you find like common part 2 topics, common part 3 topics, these articles, I don't want to be too critical, but they're not true. You have to expect the unexpected in part 2 and part 3. So overall, there's no harm in preparing for the common topics that might come up in part 1, but do remember that you need to be able to answer questions on any topic. But there's one thing that you should never do when you're preparing common topics. Can you guess what it is?
Speak in a language other than English.
No. Okay, let's find out what that thing that you should never do is. So if we look at the British Council article, 8 ways to boost your IELTS speaking score, it states, while it certainly pays off equipping yourself with relevant vocabulary, uncommon phrases and collocations, it's important to avoid memorizing large chunks of speech. So the thing that you should never do is memorize whole answers, or as it says, chunks of speech, even parts of sentences. You should never memorize those. And let's look at why it is so important, because it is a very common strategy amongst many students. Let's look at how damaging it can be to actually memorize answers. So the first reason you should never do it is examiners are actually trained to spot memorized answers. It's part of their training. But if an examiner has been doing their job like for more than a couple of months, it becomes very natural for them to be able to spot memorized answers. A lot of students say, how can they spot it? If you're doing the same thing again and again all day, every day, it becomes extremely easy, and it's easy to spot the difference between a memorized answer and a normal answer. And the other thing is that it can be quite insulting, because if you memorize an answer and you give it to the examiner, what you're basically saying to the examiner is like, I'm trying to trick you. I'm smarter than you. I'm trying to outsmart you. You're not. And it's quite insulting. You know, the examiner isn't going to give you a lower mark for feeling insulted, but they definitely will give you a lower mark because you've memorized answers. So that's more, you know, whole sentences or whole paragraphs or whole answers that students memorize. But let's go down to a more granular level of memorizing phrases or parts of sentences. If you think about it, which phrases are the ones that examiners hear the most?
Filler, like connecting words, probably.
Definitely, that would be a type of word that they would hear. But the ones that they will hear the most are the ones contained in the most popular YouTube videos that are teaching memorization.
Really?
Yes. So the more popular the person teaching it, or the more popular or the higher up on Google it is, the more it's clicked on, the higher frequency the examiners hear that, and the more likely the examiner is go like, okay, you've just memorized this. So you need to be very, very careful with this strategy. Especially, I think a lot of students see the number of views on a video, or they see like, this is a big popular teacher, therefore I can trust them. The opposite is true. The more it is used, the less likely it is to be effective. And the more likely it is that the examiner will spot it immediately. Believe me, it's very easy to spot.
Could you give us examples of like 5 words off the top of your head that are very commonly thrown around?
Yeah. Nowadays, in modern life, day by day, plethora is ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous. Wow. Okay.
And examiners will also play a really sneaky trick on you if they think that you're memorizing stuff. They will throw in a completely random topic, a question that they know you haven't prepared, and they'll throw that at you, and they'll base their score more likely on the answer to that answer. So that's how they deal with that. And because they know that you might have, okay, I've prepared an answer for this, I've prepared an answer for that, or I've memorized this. Like, okay, let's talk about, how AI will replace teachers in the future. And like, I have not really thought about, so if your answer to that is, I haven't really thought about that, you've just proved to the examiner, I can only deal with questions where my memorization techniques will work. Memorization and communication are two completely different things. Memorization and intelligence are two completely different things. And again, some of you come from educational backgrounds where you're taught rote learning, and many of you believe that memorization is, does equal intelligence. For IELTS, that's not the case. In the Western world, that is not the case. We do not really learn through rote learning and memorization. We learn in a completely different way. So not criticizing any countries or cultures or anything like that, but you need to be aware of the system that you're trying to apply to, which is the Western world.
But what if they throw a question at us that we generally don't know anything about? How would we handle something like that?
That's a good question. I think this is why students memorize answers and memorize chunks of language and things like that, because of this fear. They fear, what if I get a topic I know nothing about? So the first thing to remember is it's not a test of knowledge. It's a test of speaking. So let's do a little demo. Tell me about an Indian dish that you love and how do you cook it?
An Indian dish that I love would be chicken and rice. It's a sort of curry, and I like it spicy. And a lot of people in my family love it too. So it's usually, we all like spicy, so it's usually the same taste, and it has been for a lot of years. We put some potatoes in there and we eat it with plain boiled rice, and it's delicious.
Now tell me about an Irish dish and how you cook it.
I don't know.
Okay. Imagine we're in the speaking test. What would you say?
I don't know much about Irish food, so I haven't cooked an Irish dish, but I would love to know.
Exactly. So you haven't just said, I don't know. You've explained to the examiner, I'm not from Ireland. I don't know anything about Irish cooking, but I would love to know more about it. That will send a signal to the examiner that, okay, they don't know much about this topic. It's not a speaking problem because they were able to clearly explain why they know nothing about Irish cooking. They were able to clearly communicate that. And the examiner will then go, okay, she probably knows more about another topic. Let's talk about something else. And then you'll demonstrate how great your English is. And remember, your answer doesn't hinge on one bad answer. That's why they ask you a range of different topics and 3 different parts. So always be honest with the examiner if you don't know anything about that topic. Like, don't do it if you don't feel just, oh, I don't really prefer that topic, or it's a little bit uncomfortable. If that's the case, you just give the examiner as much as you know and be very open. Like, I don't know a huge amount about this topic, but here's what I would say. That is far more impressive than somebody who memorizes answers for topics they're expecting, and then you ask them about something like Irish cooking, and they're just like, I don't know. So always think about that. And it's also unusual that the examiners will ask you multiple topics and multiple questions about things that you don't know anything about. In general, they will ask you things that the vast majority of the whole world will be able to answer give some kind of an answer.
Yeah. And it's also usually in part 3, right? Where they ask you.
Yeah, like part 3 is where they're trying to really stretch you. So part 3, if they're asking you more difficult questions, it's because they think you're good. It's because they think you deserve a band 7, 8, or 9. They have a range of different questions that they can ask you. And if they're asking you increasingly difficult questions, that's a good sign, because they know that you can cope with those, and they're maybe thinking, does this person deserve an 8 or 8.5 or 9? Let's ask them really difficult questions. They don't. If they think that you're like a band 5, band 6, they won't ask you that many difficult questions in part 3. So be happy if you get them.
Oh, good to know.
So for the next tip, we're going to play a little game. I'm going to ask the same question to both students. One of them will answer it normally. The other one will try and use the tip as much as possible. Again, I want you to try and think about what they're doing, think about the tip, what it might be, and the difference in the level of answers. How do you think education will change in the future?
I believe everything is going to become more digital, and people are going to rely more on devices and gadgets for studying instead of pen and paper and books like it used to be back in the days. And also, I feel like they'll find their educational materials online instead of in books like we used to have.
How do you think education will change in the future?
Oh, I'm over the moon that you've asked me this question because I'm a teacher myself. I think the reason people criticize today's education is because there's this concept of the grass always being greener on the other side. In the future, the focus will perhaps be a lot more on critical thinking rather than memorizing information like unfortunately, we have today. But I think the icing on the cake with education in the future is that although it's a double-edged sword, people will be able to focus on things that are more important. And day by day, things will get better. I think it will improve for the better. You know what they say, you gotta make hay while the sun shines.
So did you spot that tip? Let's analyze both answers and think about the idiomatic language used in each answer. So for this one, here's all of the idioms and here's the ones that she used correctly. And what we did with this answer was I gave her a list of the most common idioms that are taught on YouTube and online to IELTS students. And what I did with this student was I said, just answer the question normally. We didn't tell her about idioms at all. But let's look at the idiomatic language that was used in her answer. And let's look at the ones that she used correctly. So that's just two answers. You know, a lot of teachers do use idioms, and that's going to increase your score. Is this actually true or not? So where this comes from is if you actually look at the official marking criteria. For a band 7, it says uses some less common and idiomatic vocabulary and shows some awareness of style and collocation with some appropriate choices. So it does actually say in the marking criteria, it does talk about idiomatic vocabulary, but where most people who talk about this go wrong, or where most teachers who give students lists of idioms to learn, is idiomatic language and idioms are not necessarily the same thing. So idiomatic language does include idioms, but it also includes more informal language like phrasal verbs, slang, colloquialisms, things like that. And if we look at the definition of the word idiomatic in Collins Dictionary, it says idiomatic language uses words in a way that sounds natural to native speakers of the language. And if we look at the Cambridge Dictionary definition, it says containing expressions that are natural and correct. So to summarize what idiomatic means, it's language that native English speakers would normally use. It's different from what learners of English would use, because learners of English are normally using textbook English. But if you listen to, like, when you guys have traveled to English speaking countries, do people sound weird? Like, do they sound like how you would hear them in a textbook, or is it different?
It sounds a lot more informal, a lot more, like
conversational,
you said, daily slangs and things. It doesn't sound forced or...
Yeah. So a lot of people we work with, like, we help them get the score that they need, and they move somewhere like Scotland or Ireland, and they're like, thanks very much for helping me get a band 7, but I have no idea what these people are saying. And it's like, oh, it's just because they're using English, but it's a different form of English. Like, if you were in the pub with me and my friends, you wouldn't understand a word I'm saying most of the time. Yeah. I don't speak like this to my friends. So what the official marking criteria is saying when it talks about idiomatic language is that a person at a band 7 uses some of the language that a native English speaker would use, but they don't use it completely accurately. There are some inappropriate choices, there may be some inaccuracies, but they're attempting to use the same type of language that a native English speaker would use. Now, this is completely different from how idioms are taught. How idioms are taught by a lot of people is give students a list of idioms, memorize them, use as many as they can. And what this does is, as we saw in your example, even though Priyanka is a band 9 student, she made lots and lots of errors, and she was much less fluent than she normally is. And if we look at the IDP website, they have an article on their website called How to Use Idioms. And in it states, in English, we use idioms and phrasal verbs to express ourselves. This idiomatic language is used frequently in our everyday communication. So it's very important that we understand what idioms are and how to use them. So is this saying use lots of idioms and you'll get a high score? Well, it goes on to say, we mentioned that native English speakers use idioms naturally, and the key word there is naturally. Learning a list and trying to insert as many as possible is the opposite of natural. Like if you listen to 2 native English speakers talking on a podcast and you counted the number of idioms in an hour and a half of them speaking, it might be 10 in the whole hour and a half. We do use them, but it is quite rare. Mm-hmm. What is more common is using more informal language, slang, phrasal verbs, things like that. Idioms are actually not that common. Mm-hmm. That brings me on to a really good exercise that you could do is, you really love serial killer podcasts. Like pick one where it's maybe 1 or 2. Conversational English is best for this. So maybe 2 or 3 people talking about the topic, and listen and try and notice not just the idioms, but the slang that they use. Normally that will be things that you don't really understand, or maybe local language that they're using, or phrasal verbs. Write down something that you don't understand. Don't write down all the things you do understand. This is already in your brain, but anything you don't understand, just note it down. And then most YouTube videos have transcripts where you could actually go and look at the transcript, look at it in context, guess what that means, and then do a quick Google search, check what it means. And then over time, just add in, my little list of slang phrases, my little list of phrasal verbs, my little list of idioms, and then try and use them when you're practicing your IELTS test. Just get some practice questions and then listen back, record yourself on your phone, listen back. Did you actually use them appropriately? Did you use them accurately, or are you overusing them, or are you mispronouncing them? And that way that you can just naturally up your idiomatic language and improve over time. Most people don't want to hear that. They just want a list, but lists are going to lower your score, not improve it. So the last tip is all about speaking part 2. Speaking part 2 is the part that a lot of students fear and they worry a lot about. So we want to definitely help our viewers with that. I'm not going to tell you what the tip is. I'm just going to give you both a question, the same question. One of you is going to use the tip and the other one is not going to use the tip. In the real test, what the examiner would say is, look at the cue card. You have 1 minute to prepare. You can make notes, and I'll then ask you at the end of 1 minute to speak for 2 minutes.
Something I worked on that I found to be a difficult task, both academically and in my workplace, is being able to speak slow enough. I speak very fast, naturally. You may not feel that way in the conversations that we've had, because I've had to work on that quite a bit. It was difficult for me. My brain works quite quickly, and it can bounce off things quite from one topic to the other. So I really had to make an effort to slow that down so that I don't sound like a train. So the way that I would work on it is by giving myself a beat before I say something and giving myself a beat after I say something, although I have the next 10 sentences already figured out in my brain. I realized that it just sounds a lot more coherent if I'm able to verbalize my thought and realize that there's no hurry. I have nowhere to go. I've got nothing else to do. So I give each sentence enough time and importance. When I felt that, how I felt when I'd completed the task, I felt like it really improved my communication, because it's not only what goes on internally inside your brain. It's not just enough for you to understand something, especially when you're in your place of work. It's very important on how you communicate that thought to someone else and how you wait to hear what they have to say and then formulate a thought and communicate it back. That's sometimes even more important than the original thought that you had.
Very good. So, exact same question, but I want you to do it slightly differently. I don't want you to make any notes. I want you to follow this bullet point, talk about that, then talk about this bullet point, then talk about this bullet point, then talk about this bullet point, in that order, and only talk about those bullet points. So you have 1 minute to just think about that. Don't make any notes, just talk about the bullet points.
What task did I do? The task that I had to do was understand what I was studying instead of just memorizing it. Why this task was very difficult? It was very difficult because usually when you're trying to memorize something, you tend to forget, and that puts a pressure on you. How you worked on this task? I took my time to understand each and every sentence instead of just memorizing it. Explain how you felt when you had successfully I felt like I was having much more knowledge.
Good. So the people at home, think about those two responses. Think about which one was more developed, who got to the 2 minutes without any problems, who sounded more fluent, and generally which answer felt better to you. So if we think about those two answers and the strategy that was used, one of them was using the most common tip for part 2 of the test, and one of them wasn't. This answer, she just answered it with freedom. She kept talking about the main topic, but she didn't really focus on the bullet points. She used some of them, but she didn't rigidly stick to them. And she was able to speak freely and naturally without using the bullet points as a crutch. Whereas if we compare it with you, like these are both band 9 students, you got a band 9 in the real test. But what I did was I forced you to use the most common tip, which is talk about bullet point number 1, then talk about bullet point number 2, then 3, then 4, and only do that. How did it feel answering that question in that way, because when you do part 2, you normally do very, very well. You didn't do so well that time. Why do you think it was?
I felt a certain pressure to do exactly what is in this tips, and I also felt a lot more robotic.
Yeah, it did. See, you were looking at each one, and then you also didn't get to the 2 minutes. So for you, that wouldn't be a huge problem because you're a band 9 student. I would just go like this and you would continue to talk. But for someone at a band 6, band 7 level, if they get to the end of the bullet points, they just start to panic, like, oh my, I have nothing else to say. And then that can destroy the rest of their test. So telling students, you must talk about bullet point number 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, it does more harm than good.
Can you actually use the bullet points that are given as a guideline and still have your own notes and refer to the bullet points and the guideline?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly the strategy that we teach. So we teach students that the bullet points are there to help you, but some of them, there might be one in there. Like, for example, they often say, how did you feel? Some people like me, I don't like talking about my feelings. So and even as a native English speaker, I'd be like,
that's an intrusive question.
And I would start to sound very bad. But like what happened with you, if you stick rigidly to the bullet points, some of them, like, for example, there might be one that says, like, talk about your phone. What brand is it? Like, oh, it's Apple. Like, what else am I going to say about it? That's 3 seconds out of 2 minutes. So often people will get to the end of the bullet points after 45 seconds or 60 seconds. And then it's like, oh, I have a new mountain to climb. I now I have to think about more things to say. So what we teach students is look at the 4 bullet points. Which of them are you comfortable talking about at length? It might be 4, it might be 3, it might be 2.
Right.
And then look at the topic at the top. What other things do you feel more comfortable talking about? Like for you, you're a great storyteller, so it could be the story of that. You probably like talking about your feelings and how so maybe maybe it was that. But whatever you feel comfortable talking about, add in those bullet points as you did, and that gives you complete freedom for the 2 minutes. So let's move on to the final part of this video, which covers IELTS writing tips and strategies. This is normally the part of the test that causes the most problems for students. And this is because there's a huge amount of misleading and confusing information about which tips and strategies to use for the IELTS writing test. We cover all the most popular ones in this video, so you know exactly what to do on test day. Tip number 1. What's tip number 1? This is the most popular tip that you'll find online.
High-level vocabulary will improve your score?
So is this tip actually correct? Is using lots of high-level vocabulary, is it a good tip? Will it improve your score or will it lower your score? If you go to one of the most popular IELTS videos on YouTube, it has more than 7 million views at the time of recording. This video tells you exactly that. Use lots of high-level words and you'll improve your score. All words in the English language are divided into A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. A1, A2 are words that beginner English learners can use. B1, B2, those are words that an intermediate student would be able to use. And C1, C2, those are words that only experts or expert users or expert learners would be able to use. What it says exactly in the video is if you use most of the words which are C1, C2, definitely you will get higher bands. Sounds right, sounds logical. Let's find out if it actually does improve your score. So I've got a little challenge for you. I've researched the most high-level words given in this YouTube video. I'm going to give one of you a list of these words, and I want you to write an introduction just trying to use as many of these words in your introduction as possible. And one of you, I just want you to write normally, not in trying to include lots of high-level words. We're going to see who writes the better introduction.
Cool. Okay.
So I've given you each the same question. I've given you a list of the top 10 words, the big high-level words. What I want you to do is write your introduction using as many of those words as possible, and you just write the introduction normally. Mm-hmm. Here are the two paragraphs. So I'm going to reveal which one would get the higher score in a minute. I'm going to give you some feedback on your introductions. But before we do, let's have a look and see what the British Council and IDP have to say about this tip. So if we look at the marking criteria for vocabulary for Band 9, it says uses a wide range of vocabulary with very natural and sophisticated control of lexical features. Lexical features is a fancy way of saying vocabulary. Now, what it doesn't say is it doesn't say use lots of C1 and C2 words. That's not what it does say at all. But let's talk about the key word in that sentence, which is natural. What does natural actually mean? So another way of saying natural would be, how would a native English speaker talk? All right, would a native English speaker use really high-level words to write that introduction, or would they use different words? And if we look at Band 6 in the marking criteria, what it says is attempts to use less common vocabulary, but with some inaccuracy. And this is probably the most common band score for most students. If you look at the data, Band 6 is probably the most common. And what it's really saying is the examiner looks at your essay and they see that you're trying to use more advanced words, but you're making lots of mistakes. So what the criteria is saying, the difference between Band 9 and Band 6 and what you should do to move from, say a Band 6 up to a Band 7, 8, or even 9, is you need to have a balance between the level of words that you're using. You should use some high-level words. You should have a good range, but you need to balance that with accuracy. There's no point in putting in big, complicated words if there's spelling mistakes or meaning mistakes or other mistakes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
It does.
So now let's look at what IDP say. IDP say about this: writing is a means of communicating your thoughts to the reader. This is extremely important because they're saying it's not a vocabulary test, it's a writing test. Why are you actually writing? You're writing to show that when you move to London or you move to New York and you get a job there and you're writing an email or you're writing a letter to someone or whatever you're doing, when the person reads your email or reads your letter, can they understand what you're saying? Okay. So if you're using lots of high-level vocabulary and making lots of mistakes, is that going to be good for the reader or not so good?
It's counterproductive.
Yeah. And it also says, therefore, make use of vocabulary that is easy to understand. Which is easier to understand? Lots and lots of big, complicated words, or just normal words that convey meaning correctly?
I think the latter.
And let's see, we'll see in your essays in a minute. Also, it says, only use words you can spell. Because if you memorize lots of big words, what's going to happen? You won't fully understand them and you'll make spelling mistakes. And if you make a spelling mistake, it doesn't improve your score if you have a big word. It actually lowers your score. It's only going to improve your score if you use it correctly. And most of the students learning this tip are not capable yet of using that vocabulary. So it's very counterproductive, as you said.
Risky.
Yeah, it's risky. I also did something really interesting. I took hundreds of hours of interview footage with real Band 7, 8 and 9 success stories from our VIP course, and I uploaded them into AI called Notebook LM. Notebook LM is from Google, and it allows you to search through thousands of pages. So we asked Notebook LM, did a single student say that fancier words improved their score? And Notebook LM said, no, a single student did not say that using fancier words improved their score. On the contrary, the sources indicate that many students and instructors found the opposite to be true. Attempting to use fancier or more complex vocabulary often hindered their scores or led to lower results. So not just IDP, not just British Council, but the actual students that were in your position, that were at a Band 6, were at a Band 7, and then moved up to the score that they needed. This is the advice that they are giving you too. And remember the question I gave you? It was actually from these books, these Cambridge books. So Cambridge, the people who write the IELTS test, the people that own the IELTS test, they produced an essay in response to the same question. They got their examiners to write the essay, and they said it's very good. What we did was we took that essay produced by Cambridge and we put it through some software that analyzes all the words in it, and it shows you how many C1, C2. The very smart people at Cambridge, what percentage of their words in the essay do you think are C1 and C2?
Maybe 60, 70% at least.
I would say 20.
20?
Yeah.
So 20%, 60%. So
Yeah.
pretty high. Let's have a look. 95% of their words are not high level. So
Really?
95% of their words are A1, A2, B1, B2. Only 5% are C1, and none of them were C2. So what does all of that tell you? Is this tip correct? Use lots of high level words?
It's a complete opposite, as a matter of fact.
So let's have a look at your actual introductions. If we have a look at yours first, what I can say about your introduction is all of your vocabulary is accurate. So you've used some higher level words, but the vast majority of your words, like the Cambridge essay, the vast majority of your words are A1, A2, B1, B2. And if we look at any of these books, take any of these books off the shelf, we could open any page and read any paragraph. The vast majority of the words in any book are going to be A1, A2, B1,
Okay.
because that's how every language, that's how Hindi works, that's how English works, that's how Vietnamese works. You only use high level words when you have to, because clear writing is simple writing. Well, let's look at your, so it's not your real introduction,
Yeah.
we forced you to use this many words. So your first sentence, I can't ever say this word. So your first sentence, the proliferation of increased life expectancy. So what does proliferation mean? Does it actually mean what you think it means there?
No, I just like the word, so I thought I'd might as well use it.
So it means a rapid and often excessive increase in something, like the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Like there's too many nuclear weapons. Are there too many of the thing that you're mentioning here? And what are you talking about here?
The increase of life expectancy.
Yeah, so it's actually saying there's too much life expectancy. Would we talk about old people in that way?
No, yeah, you're right.
It sounds like overly dramatic. And it would be very obvious to an examiner that you have just copied that word from some list and stuck it in there. So it doesn't actually mean what you think it means. So that's wrong. Even though it's spelled correct, the grammar is correct, the meaning is incorrect.
Yeah.
And now is now a ubiquitous fact in the modern world. Why do you think that's wrong?
I thought it kind of meant that it's everywhere, but I guess in the context of this situation, it's not the case.
Is it the case that this is happening everywhere in every country, in every part of that country?
No.
All over the world?
No.
So again, is it accurate?
No.
And we can summarize that by just saying that there's spelling mistakes in there, but most of the time you're just trying too hard by including words that don't mean what you think they mean. All right. Just because a word is complex or high level doesn't actually get you the score. So the next tip, this is the second most popular tip. What is it?
Linking words will improve your score.
So let's find out, do using lots of linking words improve your score or not? So linking words are often called linkers or cohesive devices, but basically what this tip is saying is the more you use them and the more advanced your linking words are, the higher your score. Is this actually true? So what I did was I had a look at Google and I Googled IELTS linking words and I found the most popular article at the top of Google, and they say they need more connecting words for IELTS higher band descriptors. So it's very, very clear what they're saying. Well, let's see if that is actually true. So what I've also done is I've looked at the most popular YouTube video on this topic, and they say to get a higher score in IELTS writing, you must use some more formal linking words. When they say formal, they mean advanced or academic. So they're saying exactly the same thing. So the most popular article and the most popular YouTube video are all saying to you, use lots of linking words and make them advanced, make them formal, make them academic, and that's going to magically boost your score. Is this actually true? I'm going to give you a challenge again. I want you to continue your essay, write the first main body paragraph. You are going to write it normally, and you are going to include as many different of these most popular linking words as you can in your essay. And these are the same linking words that I found in these articles and in these videos. So let's have a look at your sample essays and see what you did. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 linking words in one paragraph.
Yeah.
So would an examiner notice that? And why would they notice it?
They probably would. Because it feels like I'm trying to stretch out my answer a bit and just add words that don't do anything to the substance.
That's a good point. One of the reasons why students love these linking words is they're afraid that they won't go over 250 words. They're like, I know these things, I've memorized these things, let's just put them in and that'll get us over 250 words. But the problem with that strategy is it's not a word count test. It's not how many words can you write. Is the collection of those words leading to a clear essay. So if we have a look at all of the linking words here, you'll find all of these errors. So you can see the vast majority of the linking words have some kind of problem with them. So where in your essay or in your paragraph here did you decide to put a linking word?
Over here, I said for instance.
Why did you do that?
Because I wanted to give an example.
So that's an example of an accurate and appropriate. So it's accurate because the meaning is correct and you spelt it correctly, but it's also appropriate because you're giving an example and you said, for instance, or for example, here's an example. But if you look at the rest of your paragraph, you didn't try and put them in everywhere.
Yeah.
But is your essay or is your paragraph clear, easy to understand? I would say absolutely yes. We don't need to put anything in. So let's see what the official marking criteria and British Council and the IDP says about this. So if we look at the official marking criteria, it says for band 9 for coherence and cohesion, that's really interesting what they say here. It says uses cohesion in such a way that attracts no attention. In other words, if a native English speaker was reading your essay, they wouldn't notice any of the linking words at all. So they wouldn't look at it and think, why are they including so many of these types of words? They would read it and they wouldn't even notice it. Like if they're reading a newspaper in English or they're reading one of these books, no native English speaker would read a paragraph in that book and they go, why did they put moreover and in conclusion and therefore and it's too much? So what an examiner does is they look at your essay for band 9, they're like, I'm not even noticing any of the linking words. That should give you a clue. Does including lots of linking words actually improve your score? And if we look at what the British Council says, they go into even more detail on their website, and it says, don't overuse linking words. So it's pretty clear what the British Council are saying. And this is directly opposite to what the most popular YouTube video and the most popular blog say about using these. The British Council also says, or use them inappropriately. So what does inappropriate mean? Inappropriate is slightly different from inaccurate. Inaccurate means that the spelling is wrong or the meaning is wrong. Inappropriate means that you're normally overusing them. You don't really need to use them there. So this is a problem with people who try and insert them a little bit too much.
So keep it more natural, basically.
Exactly. They also say don't always use linking words at the beginning of sentences. Again, the British Council is being very clear here. The reason why they're saying that is because the examiners at the British Council see this every single day, where they read essays and at the beginning of every sentence, it has a linking word in there. And the reason why many students do this is because they memorize templates. And the templates will have basically the linking word at the beginning of every sentence, and then it'll say insert idea or insert explanation or insert example. This is why people who memorize templates end up getting a band 5 or a band 6. And if we go to the IDP website, it only shows the simplest linking words. It gives you linking words, but it only shows the simplest ones. So why would IDP, who make the test and hire the examiners to score your essay, why would they give you that? And if we go back to the marking criteria and have a look for band 6 for coherence and cohesion, it says uses cohesive devices effectively, but cohesion within or between sentences may be faulty or mechanical. So what does that mean? So faulty means you're using them inappropriately or inaccurately. Mechanical means is you are inserting them kind of robotically. So start of every sentence, put one in. Middle of sentence, put one in. So you're just acting like a robot and putting them in at every opportunity. And again, that's why templates have such problems. So we'll have a look at what Notebook LM said about the hundreds of success stories. What did they say about linking words? So what it says was students improved their scores by moving away from the idea that more complex or numerous linking words equated to a higher score. So at home, which one do you think is better? This one. Sorry.
That one.
So let's move on to tip number 3. This is the third most popular tip on IELTS Writing Task 2 that I could find on the internet.
Grammatical range will increase your score?
So what they're talking about when they talk about grammatical range is the complexity of your sentences. Are you using more complex sentences or simpler sentences? Or are you using more tenses, like a variety of different tenses, or just one tense throughout your whole essay? Or are you using a variety of different grammatical structures within your essay? Are you capable of doing that? And you'll often hear teachers debating whether range is more important. It's more important to have lots of tenses, lots of grammatical structures, lots of complexity, or is accuracy more important? How many grammatical errors are you making? Generally, it's like a balance between the two. So which one is more important? So your challenge is, what I want you to do is take the same question. So you've got your introduction, main body paragraph 1, main body paragraph 2. I want you to write main body paragraph 2, but play it safe. I want you to focus on accuracy, not making any grammatical errors.
Okay.
What I want you to do is I'm going to give you a list of all the key tenses, so all the different tenses that you could use in the English language. And I'm also going to give you the essential grammar structures, so all the different grammatical structures that you could use in your essay. What I want you to do is use as many of them as possible. So let's have a look at YouTube and see what advice most teachers and most videos are given about this debate, whether it's range or whether it's accuracy. So if you go to YouTube and type in IELTS Task 2 tips, the number one video, the one right at the top, gives you advice on this, and it's very, very clear. They state variety is more important than accuracy. But if we look at the band descriptors, the official marking criteria, it makes it very, very clear that both are important, range and accuracy. So for band 9, for grammatical range and accuracy, it states uses a wide range of structures with full flexibility and accuracy. So what it's saying there is one is not more important than the other. They're both important. To thank you for watching this video, I have a gift for you. It is our complete IELTS preparation guide. And what I've done is put every single strategy and every single structure for every writing question that might come up on test day. If you want this, all you have to do is just go to the description, click on the link, and you'll get all of those structures and strategies, plus everything you need for listening, reading, and speaking. And if we go down and look at band 7, it says produces frequent error-free sentences. This is really crucial that you understand what an error-free sentence is. What do you think an error-free sentence is?
Make no errors.
Make no errors at all, or no grammatical errors or vocabulary or spelling errors, or?
I think grammatical.
Yeah, so spelling isn't included in grammar. meaning mistakes with vocabulary wouldn't be included. They would only include things like punctuation errors, tenses errors, subject-verb agreement, article, just grammar. So what it's actually telling us here is the importance of error-free sentences. So the more error-free sentences you have, the higher your score is going to be. That's absolutely crucial to understand that.
What does frequently produces mean?
Good question. So frequently means more than 50%.
Okay.
So an examiner should be able to look at your essay, literally count the number of sentences. So if there are 13 sentences in your essay, for a band 7, you would need at least 7 of them, more than 50%, to have 0 grammatical errors in them. But if you had, let's say, 8 or 9 sentences that even have a small punctuation error in them, you're not producing frequently error-free sentences. So we have all of these sources. The most popular video is saying range is more important. IDP, the British Council, the marking criteria are saying both are important. But what we have found is working with students day to day is if we tell students to increase the complexity of their sentences and include more complex grammar structures and tenses, what do you think happens?
Lowers your score.
In what way?
You'll make more errors.
Yeah, exactly. The more complex your sentences, the more likely you are to make errors. IDP are also very, very clear about this on their website. They say uses a range of grammatical structures correctly. So they don't just say use a range of structures. They don't just say use as many structures as you want. They say use them correctly. But I think the most important evidence comes from our past success stories. So again, we asked Notebook LM, and this is what it says. Students frequently discussed their initial misconceptions and eventual understanding of using complex grammar in their IELTS essays. Many started with the belief that employing a high volume of complex vocabulary and intricate grammatical structures would impress examiners and lead to higher scores. However, this approach often proved to be counterproductive, leading to several negative outcomes: lower scores, increased mistakes, lack of clarity and coherence, time management issues, and frustration and demotivation. So if you want lower scores, increased mistakes, lack of clarity, time management issues, frustration, demotivation, and ultimately failing your test, try and make your grammar as complex as possible and see what happens. Or keep it simple. So if we look at your sample, there are 0 mistakes. Now, why do you think some students would be worried about writing the paragraph the way that you wrote it? There's no mistakes at all. But why would some students be worried about that? Why would they not want to follow what you did?
I think just the pressure of making it sound more complex gets to them, and they want to impress the examiner. And that's why they make it complicated and make errors.
Yeah, so they're worried about there's not enough range. So they're looking at these YouTube videos, they're listening to their local teachers, and they're saying range is really, really important. But the thing that we have always found is when we tell students, just do what you did, all we said was just make it as simple as possible. They naturally use a wide range of structures without even thinking about it. They do it naturally. So if we look at your sample here, there are complex sentences. For example, as people live longer, they naturally require more medical attention. So this is, first clause is dependent on the second. That's a complex sentence. There's relative clauses in there, long-term care, which leads to increased government spending, grandparents who may need this healthcare, interactions they have with children, which fosters deep family bonds. You have complex sentences, you have relative clauses, you also have the passive voice in there. So by telling students, just keep it simple, you are reducing the number of errors and you're letting them show a variety of grammatical range and structures anyway. But if we have a look at your sample, you will see that it is littered with errors. So it is more complex. The range is more, but the thing to know is that let's say your range is technically at a band 9, but you've made so many errors that the accuracy is at a band 6. You don't get like the middle band between 9 and 6. You get a 6. So whatever the lowest of those two, range and accuracy, is, you will get that score. Remember we talked about error-free sentences? How many error-free sentences are on that page?
0.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the maximum you can get is a 6. Maximum. And if your grammar is at a 6, your coherence and cohesion is likely going to be closer to a 6 as well. Because what does coherence mean? It means, is your essay clear? Is that clear?
Not very, no.
No. The more mistakes, the less clear it is. It can also affect your task response. So task response is, did you answer the question correctly? I don't think for you, but for many of the students that we work with that have really, poor grammar that they need to improve, there's so many grammatical errors that it's impossible for the examiner to really understand if you answered the question or not. And if they can't understand that, even though it's because of grammar, you get a very low score for task response. Did you answer the question? This advice of use as many structures as possible, it's not only lowering your grammar score, but can mess up the rest of your essay as well. So I hope none of you think that I'm making this video to prove that some teachers are right and some teachers are wrong. I'm trying to help the teachers. So if you are a teacher watching this, try and think about not what you find on the internet and just copying that, but what effect does it actually have on the classroom? So you might read something on a blog, you might watch a YouTube video, and you might copy that tip and teach it to your students, but always work with the students directly the way we're doing here. Look at the impact that tip has. Ask them, has this actually increased your score, and how do they feel about using that tip? So when I said to you, try and use as many different structures as possible, how did you feel?
Overwhelmed. And I just felt like I had to focus on that rather than the content of what I was saying.
Yeah, so many of the tips, again, I'm not criticizing teachers, but if you actually apply them in the classroom and ask students, how do you feel about this? Not only does it lower scores, but they feel things like they're overwhelmed, they're stressed. And do you want your students to feel overwhelmed and stressed in the classroom and fail their test? So always test it and see how it actually works in practice without just blindly copying it off the internet. Tip number 4 is the 4th most popular IELTS writing tip.
Repeating words lowers your score?
So again, what I did was I put this into YouTube, and the most popular YouTube video on this topic said, stop repeating vocabulary in IELTS speaking and writing. So very, very clear what they think on that. If you repeat words, it will lower your score. So let's check out what the official marking criteria says. We should always go to that document because that's the document the examiners use. It doesn't actually talk about repetition and repeating words until you get to band 4. So for band 4 for vocabulary, it states uses only basic vocabulary which may be used repetitively or which may be inappropriate for the task. Now, does that mean if you repeat a word, you get a band 4? What do you think?
No, not automatically.
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll find out. So what I've done is I've taken, remember, the essay from Cambridge, and I put it into some software that shows the keyword density. So it takes words that are repeated many, many times, and this is what it shows. So people is repeated 10 times, population 4 times, longer 4 times, many, aging, older, many, many times. So the people at Cambridge are definitely saying, if you repeat a word, it's not a big deal. So if we just looked at the marking criteria and we looked at band 4, we interpreted that as if you repeat a word, you get a band 4. Every single one of our successful students would get a band 4 because there will always be at least one word that you will repeat. So what is the rule? How often is it okay to repeat words and which words are okay to repeat? So we took 100 of our band 7, 8 and 9 students' essays, and we put these 100 essays into the same software to identify if there are any words that are repeated again and again. The top 20 words make up 33.5% of all the words. These are words like a, and, at, the, very, very common words in the English language. And this isn't just the case for English. If you go and look at a book in Hindi, you will find some words are repeated again and again. All languages are the same. So somebody telling you, you can never repeat a word is going against language itself. That's how language works. There are certain words that have to be repeated again and again.
Shouldn't we worry about repeating words at all?
Good question. There are some words that you should try to vary. So what I'm going to do now is just teach you that rule so that you can be confident on test day and not worry about repeating words. Because the last thing we want is that you go into the test and you're consumed with worrying about all of these different things that you can and can't do. We want to just make it simple for you to just focus on writing and not have to think about all these things. So it often comes up where you see a question and you see a keyword in the question and you think, well, how do I avoid repeating that word? So for example, people is a very, very common word. So in general, you have 3 choices. Choice number 1 is you can change it to something that you're not sure if it's correct, but you think generally, might be a synonym. So for people, that might be something like citizens. But depending on the context, citizens might be correct or it might be wrong. So citizens is more about the relationship a person has with the government. So a citizen of a country, whereas that might be wrong if you're just talking about, people's health. If you said something, citizens have less exercise than before. That's nothing to do with your relationship with the government. So that would actually be wrong. Or choice 2, you could just repeat the word. So you could just say people. Choice 2 is less wrong than choice 1. Choice 1 is just wrong. Choice 2 is not great because you could probably show the examiner that you know how to vary that a little bit more, but it is better to make a safe bet and to just repeat the word if you're not sure. The third choice is actually much better, and it's something that most people don't consider because they've been taught, we look back at tip 1, you must use high-level language. That's why people would put citizens in there. What you could do instead is just use a really, really simple word, something that 100% is correct. So what's a synonym of people that is really simple?
Humans, human beings.
Yep.
Or individuals.
Humans.
Crowd.
Or individuals. Yep. Humans maybe a little bit scientific sounding, but individuals, that would cover everything. So you have 3 choices in summary. Change it to something that you think is high level, but it's probably wrong. Just repeat the word. That's the second best choice because you're not showing a massive range, but you are not making mistakes either. It's a balancing act. But choice 3 is just think of the simplest one, the one that and we call this a 100% rule. Only change the word if you are 100% sure that it is correct. So that way you're never making mistakes. You're never lowering your score because of errors, and you're staying safe. And the other thing is more strategic, is more tactical. If you see people in the question and you're thinking, how do I change people? My teacher told me that I can't repeat a word. What is happening?
You're wasting time.
Exactly. And?
You're overwhelming yourself.
Yeah, it's wasting time and getting more stressed. 2 of the things that are nothing to do with the English language, they're nothing to do with writing, but they're everything to do with test strategy. Remember, it is a test at the end of the day. So we want to do things, if we think very strategic, that minimize the chances of making a mistake, reduce the amount of time that it takes to make that decision, and increases the chances that we can just move on and keep going and get the score that we need. So that's why this 100% rule works really, really well. So would you say this tip is right or wrong? You could never repeat a word.
Wrong.
I think it depends on the reoccurrence of how many times are you using the word. So you have to consider that before you repeat it too many times.
Yeah, in general, it is wrong. You should try to vary your language as much as you can, but only as much as you can, which means 100% rule. So, number 5, who wants to open number 5?
Yeah, I got the last one.
A hook will increase your score.
Do you know what a hook is? What's a hook?
Something that baits you in, like a hook would, just to keep your attention for a longer period of time.
And where would you put it?
At the beginning.
Okay. So I want you to look at your introduction and think about, does your introduction actually need a hook? Would it improve your introduction?
Yeah, I think so.
It would improve it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So let's think about improving your introduction with a hook. So what I want you to do is I want you to hook me in by writing an amazing hook at the beginning, and then we'll have a look at what British Council and IDP say about hooks while you are writing. So when I searched Google and YouTube, I found a teacher who took this to a whole new level, and this is a very, very common way of teaching. And I'm not criticizing the teacher or the method. I'll help you teachers as well. I'll give you some advice on how to avoid this. But they have produced complete templates, and all the student has to do is just memorize the whole thing. There's lots of hooks at the beginning. There's lots of language they can memorize, and then just insert your ideas. But the hook seems to be very, very important here. So the important thing, if you're a teacher, is to think about why you're doing this. And I know where this comes from. You're trying to help the students because you think the templates are going to help them, and students want it. So you're a nice person, so you're going to give them what they want and you're going to try and help them. But what I can tell you from examiners is examiners are trained to spot these. And if you mark as many scripts as examiners do, you will see these again and again and again. And the examiner is allowed to give you 0 if they consider it just a complete fabrication. You're just memorizing an answer and giving it to them. So I know you're trying to help students, but you could be helping them fail the test. So be very, very careful with these.
So then why do people include hooks in their answers?
Well, I think hooks in general are to grab someone's attention. So it's like hooking a fish. So, but what I can tell you for sure is examiners do not need hooks because they are being paid. Only reason the examiner is looking at your essay is because they're being paid to do that. They would rather do anything else in the world than look at your essay. So by including a hook, you're not getting them to look at the fee that you paid is the hook.
Well said. Well said.
So let's have a look at what you did here.
Nowadays, life expectancy is skyrocketing.
Okay, does that add anything to your essay? Does it make it better?
Not really.
Does it make it worse in any way?
I feel like it's just unnecessary.
Yeah, and it's also
There.
repeating things. So it
Right,
says
exactly.
It's skyrocketing and it is increasing. Right, so it's redundant, all right? But the other thing is, how did you feel when I said, now write a hook?
Confused.
And what would it do on test day?
I think it would overwhelm me, put me under pressure, and I'll waste time thinking of a hook.
Exactly. Hooks will not lower your score per se, but they will waste time and they will take up brain power that you could spend in other areas, and it actually can lead to mistakes. But the big thing is that the examiner sees them again and again and again, so they're just redundant, and you are basically waving a flag to the examiner saying, I don't know how to write an essay. So that's not a great way to start. So what does the marking criteria say about this? Well, some very, very interesting stuff. If you go to the marking criteria and look at band 0, well, number 1, it says if you did not attend. So if you slept in, if you got drunk the night before and were sleeping through the whole thing, you would get a band 0. Or if you don't write anything. So if you just show up and you literally fall asleep on the paper, you get a band 0. Or it says if you write a totally memorized response. So what it is saying is, a memorized response, which includes templates and hooks and things, is as good as falling asleep and writing nothing.
Oof.
Why do you think that is?
So it didn't require any skill. You're just regurgitating information.
Exactly. Memorization and writing and communicating are not the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the same thing at all. It's the opposite to what they're actually testing. Because if you move to New York or you move to London and your boss says, can you write an email? Are you going to go, I just need to go and find some templates and memorize this thing.
Yeah.
You know, they would fire you on the spot because you're demonstrating that you can't actually communicate in English. And if we have a look at what IDP say, they say, don't use any memorized language, phrases, or examples throughout your essay. They're easy for examiners to spot and don't demonstrate your ability to write fluently. So, is this a good tip?
No.
No.
No. Tip number 6, second to last one. This is an interesting one, very controversial one.
Oh, we like controversial. Idioms will increase your score?
What do we think? Increase or decrease?
Increase.
Increase?
No, wait.
I think.
If used,
Told you it was controversial.
if used sparingly and when appropriate,
Okay.
can be good, but too much of a risk to take to just throw in there and hope for the best. So if it's a general thing, then maybe no.
Let's see. If you type idioms into YouTube, you'll find lots of videos. One of the most popular ones is like 40 awesome idioms. And this is specifically for IELTS writing. So this teacher is definitely indicating that idioms are awesome and you should use them in your writing, but is that actually good advice or not? So let's finish our essay with a great conclusion. I'm going to give you a list of idioms, all the most common idioms that I could find on YouTube, the ones that lots of people are suggesting improve your score. Include as many of them as you can in your conclusion. You just write your conclusion normally. So you both finished your conclusions?
Yeah.
Let's see what the marking criteria says about idioms. Well, the marking criteria actually says nothing about idioms. It's silent on idioms. But the speaking criteria talks a little bit about them. And that's where the clue is. But the speaking criteria doesn't talk about idioms. It talks about idiomatic language. And this is where the confusion comes from. They interpret that as idiomatic language, band 8, means use lots of idioms and you'll get a high score. The problem is that is just for speaking, and idiomatic language doesn't mean use lots of idioms. And if we look at the IDP website, when it talks about their guide to IELTS writing, it is 100% clear. It states don't use idioms. So again, this is not me attacking teachers, it's me trying to help the teachers. If you see something that on the surface looks like, oh, this is going to help students, actually dig a little bit deeper and look at the meaning of words that you might be a little bit unsure of. And if you look at idiomatic language, for example, you will find that it doesn't just mean idioms, and it is only really applicable to speaking, not to writing. And if we look at your conclusion, are there any problems with your conclusion?
Yes. Way too many idioms. Goes around in circles, not really getting anywhere.
There's a lot of cliches in there, like all in all, every coin has two sides, a double-edged sword. These are overused and redundant.
Yeah.
You've also misused the icing on the cake. Icing on the cake means that it's attractive but inessential. So icing on the cake is like we don't need this. It's not essential, but it's nice to have, you know?
Sure.
But you've misunderstood the meaning and talked about it being like primary. You'll see a lot of students write things like nowadays, in modern life, day by day, in this day and age, part and parcel. Again, we need value per word. It's not actually adding any value. It's just cliche, meaningless filler. And if we compare that with your conclusion, every single word, every single sentence is adding value to the reader. If we think about what a conclusion is, it should help the reader understand your point of view and your opinion just by clearly summarizing that in a conclusion. So instead of having to wade through all of these cliches and idioms and things that don't really mean anything, you've just said like, this is exactly what I think. That makes the reader happy. Happy examiners normally give higher scores than examiners that have a headache. So well done. So all in all, are idioms a good idea in writing task 2?
It's a complete opposite, as a matter of fact.
Last but not least, using a little overused cliche there.
You must write more than 250 words.
The answer to this is yes and no. So a few years ago, you had to go over 250 words. If you wrote 249, you automatically got a lower score. Not many people know this, but they did away with that. So if you're just under, but you write a great essay, you should be fine. But we never tell students that. Don't tell anybody. We shouldn't be saying this. The reason why we never say that to people is like it doesn't matter. Is if you say that to someone, again, this is thinking about strategically in the classroom. Students interpret that, or a lot of students interpret that as it doesn't matter. And really it does. So the sweet spot is if your essay is around 260 to 300, normally that's quite a good essay.
But my essay, if it's over 300, is that a problem?
Again, yes and no. So yours is about 330, 340. So you're about 10% over what we would recommend. So it's not a huge deal. But what we have found is when students start to go over 300, two things happen. One, the obvious one, they start to run out of time. Remember, you're not just doing task 2, you also have to do task 1 writing. So if you start to write like 350, 400 words, you're eating into that time that you should be dedicating to task 1. And the second reason is once you go over 300, you're not giving yourself enough time to check your work. And you can also start to make a lot more mistakes, start to go off on tangents. So again, it's this tactical way of thinking about the test is if you 260 to 300, you've got the best of both worlds. You wrote enough, but you also have time to check your work, correct any mistakes, and then move on to task 1 if you haven't done task 1 yet. Don't think in terms of 250. When you're practicing, count the number of words. And if it's between like 260 to 300, not exactly, but in and around there, then you're in the sweet spot. To thank you for making it to the end of this video, we have 2 gifts for you. We have 2 complete courses for you. If you're a beginner and you just want to understand the overall format of the test, I would recommend this 1-hour crash course. Or if you want to go into a lot of detail, this 11-hour course is the most detailed, most comprehensive IELTS course you will find on YouTube.